This is Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and we are live with Stew Webb. Tonight is going to be an absolutely fascinating discussion, assuming we can get this going. What I'd like to do is, this is our second interview, and we're going to be talking about some really amazing stuff. Do you want to start off with just give yourself a background, as a short background for those who haven't heard the previous interview? And then I do encourage everyone to go and listen to the previous interview. It will be well worth your while. And meanwhile, let's see what we can do as far as the rest of this goes. So Stu, if you can basically, when you called me, you talked about sorry, I'm trying to get this screen organized, but it's absolutely not going to do it. When you called me, you talked about having some documents that you just were able to release, and what I'd like to do is direct people to your website to begin with, so that they can go and click on some of those links as you speak. We are going to get into the whole PROMIS software situation, but before we do that, I wanted you had some documents about the I believe it was the mortgage scandal going on.
Yes, if someone goes to everyone goes to my website at www.stewwebb.com, stewwebb.com, and scroll down about an inch, you'll see breaking news. Click on there, and then go down about a foot until you come to today's date. You see a second set of flags there, and look at today's date. You'll see Project Camelot. We're going to be discussing some of the documents in it. And also right below that is about the mortgage scandal. And as I promised you before, Kerry, that I would give you the information. And what I released is because the SEC is covering this up, and I believe the U.S. Attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney out of New York, that's on the Special Crimes Task Force, that supposedly just did the settlement with the banks of the $25 billion. They announced it within 5 days, within, I think, 10 days after I gave them the information. And it pertains to Asset Investors, a publicly traded corporation, a subsidiary of MDC Holdings of Denver, Colorado, which was the parent company of Silverado Savings, the CIA dirty bank, money laundering, narcotics, etc., that my ex-in-laws owned with Larry Mizell, who's the current bank bailout scamster. And those documents represent the bundlers. These are the people that were buying up mortgages all across the United States from mortgage brokers. They would take then and duplicate the mortgages after they sold the original mortgage to Wall Street pension funds, bonds, to other banks and institutions, financial institutions. Then they turn around and they duplicated those same mortgages, same paperwork, and they peddled them a second time, a third time, a fourth, clip to 9 times. And they were actually paying the payments on them so that they would not trigger anything until they got it flooded into the market. Then they could trigger it, and they were back their mortgage-backed securities that they then began peddling with what is known as the derivative market, where they could profiteer, should we say, they could times it 400%, up to 400 underneath Obama, 100 underneath George Bush. Now, those are the entities that were buying up and bundling the mortgages. And if anybody clicks on those links inside where it says Asset Investors this, Asset Investors that, they are no longer in existence. As soon as I and others helped put them in the bank bailout situations, people inside U.S. intelligence helped me in Interpol. In 2008, we thought we had them going to bankruptcy court and the whole 9 yards. Bush bails them out, of course, at taxpayers' expense. Now, all of a sudden, Asset Investors is no longer traded on the New York Stock Exchange. It was Colorado's largest financial institution, by the way, I might add. And there is a link in there, in the very bottom of it, about Norman Brownstein. Norman is Larry Mizell, my former father-in-law. It's now dead. That Mizell, the Illuminati bankers pass the money on to the next one, usually their sons, but in this case, his son wasn't part of the game. So he passed it on to Mizell, who became the new Illuminati banker. But when they pass it, everything goes to them. But Mizell and Millman had come up with the idea of duplicating all these mortgages in the whole 9 yards. And and actually paying payments for a while before they triggered a financial collapse. They figured they could get control of 90 to 95% of the economy before that happened, of which they have now, and they've done that in the past 30 years. So they are the ones that are responsible for the financial collapse in bundling up mortgages worldwide. And it goes right back to that company. They dropped off the New York Stock Exchange immediately before the bank bailout was announced. They were also, through Richmond American Homes, one of the largest home building corporations in the United States, one of the top 10. I believe it's actually now in the top 5. They were actually making it look like they were building houses in Southern California. Tens of thousands of houses, of which were never built, Richmond, Ponderosa, Red Hawk Homes, and others. And those entities are no longer in existence, a couple of them. But those were sold to the CalPA. That's the California Pension Fund. And that's what bellied up, and a lot of the municipalities bought those mortgages. And if you remember, Elizabeth Warren was one of the first to scream, and then the attorney generals of many states, including Massachusetts, she was screaming about it here 4, 5, 6 months ago about the fact they were going to prosecute the ones that were doing the scams. And this is where banks came back in. They came back in with their banks that they owned and controlled, major banks. And they came back in and they had mortgages, and they were trying to foreclose on people that were legitimately paying their mortgage and had been to, say, ABC Mortgage Company over here. And they would come in and say, no, we're Citibank, and we own your mortgage, and we're foreclosing on your house. Well, they did this to 3.5 million people have been affected by this, and their equity's just totally gone. They were raped, robbed, and looted by these same people. Now,
Okay.
Economic plunder under U.S. laws, I'm not an attorney, but underneath U.S. laws, economic plunder is the death penalty. These people should be brought to trial. This is like killing somebody causing economic plunder.
Sure, I hear you. Okay, when you say you're talking about the derivatives, can you talk a little bit more about the derivative situation? Because I know that actually that is the next, more or less, the next card that's supposed to fall in this list of dominoes that's going on. So
in the bottom of that link on the same posting about the mortgage bailout, you'll see Norman Brownstein. He's a director of Deutsche Bank. He's also my ex-in-laws and Larry Meisel's attorney. Norman Brownstein was one of the 6 CI counsel to George Herbert Walker Bush when he was CI director. He's the one that's been setting up all these trusts to hide their identity and hide their assets. He always turns up at the directorship. Citicorp, AIG, Silverado, et cetera, et cetera. Every place you go, here's the Global Crossings. Everything that's ever gone bankrupt or had a problem, here's Norman Brownstein. But Norman Brownstein is on the board of directors of Deutsche Bank in charge of selling and pushing mortgage-backed derivatives. Now, when they do that, they're raising money for their own bank. They're selling garbage. It's like the junk bond daisy chain. They're selling paper that's worthless. It's like the Federal Reserve. They loan to a Federal Reserve Bank. That Federal Reserve Bank could turn around. It used to be they could loan out 22 times for every dollar that the Fed actually loaned them.
right.
Now, underneath Bush, it went to 100, and under Obama, it's gone to 400%, which is just bizarre. Paper money out of nowhere.
Okay, but can I stop you right there and ask you?
Please.
Okay, the mortgage derivatives, though, is this going on right now? It's continuing?
It's continuing. It's not. They're not passing the mortgages so much, but the derivatives are still going around. It's like if you take the country of Greece, they figured that 40% of the debt to their banks in Greece are nothing but Goldman Sachs derivatives that were peddled to them. And if they were to bankrupt on them, it would solve the problem in Greece and their debt. They just take care of the problem. And if all the banks worldwide and all the countries would say, screw the Federal Reserve and screw Europe Central Bank, ECB, these are the same 100 Templar bankers, and go back to gold or silver standards in each country like Kennedy wanted to do before they assassinated him when he started printing $2 silver certificates and $5 silver certificates.
Okay.
Start the bank again.
Let me ask you this, just to bring this even more up to date. Are you aware that there, in theory, that Geithner has been arrested? Have you heard this?
Well, I heard that he had been detained at one time here several months back, and he was
No, actually, I heard that last week he was arrested. And I also heard that Bill Gates was arrested. I did call Microsoft to get a statement. I put this on my blog. And basically, they will not confirm or deny that information. However, I have back channel information that tells me this indeed is happening, and that indeed Bill Gates is as we speak, allegedly being detained and is under arrest. The reason was he gave a backdoor through software to Bush to get access to getting a cut off the top of these trading programs that go on.
Well, the trading programs, there's a story. I haven't heard say this. I have.
Okay.
There was something about the arrest of Geithner the other day. Someone mentioned it. I remembered that, it was in the past, but that was the extent of it. But no, I really don't know about either one of them at the current time. But I am aware of the backdoor deals. If you were to go to my table of contents off the front page or off the news page towards the top and click there, go to the third column over from the left, and go down where there's several stories, there must be 24 of them written by Tom Flacco. It's talking about the insider trading and 15-second delay and spying on the American people and so forth in the trading. Actually, there's a window of almost 3 minutes now that I understand that they can do in trading before anybody else has that information. So.
Okay. Are you familiar with anything to do with the global, what are called the global settlements or the Iraqi dinar?
No, I am not.
Okay.
I am.
All right. So as far as this mortgage scandal goes, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we move on to this subject, the PROMIS software and so on?
No, except for the fact that they need to really look at. I'm asking everybody that views this video, go out there and start, clicking on those links versus assets, this, assets, that, and look at it. And, for those feds that are covering up, they've always got Denver, Colorado covering up. They've got the FBI, the DEA, CIA. They got, U.S. attorneys, judges all in their pockets. I have, you could see bribes and payoffs in a link that says Obama, Bush narcotics money laundering funds Obama and McCain. It's on both the front page underneath Larry Mizell and also in that link about the mortgage bankers. And look at those bribes of the U.S. attorney and so forth. They've got them in their pocket. It's going to take somebody that's got some guts and somebody that will, should we say, other than an override Eric Holder, who's a cover-up meister for him, maybe somebody in this new strike force. They got 53 attorneys and 200 agents. Maybe somebody will really do something. I don't know. But I'm seeing cover-up going on all over the place, as usual, to take care of the insiders and to take care of this Bush crime syndicate. Of course.
Okay. All right. And just for the listeners, we are going to be covering the PROMIS software situation and going through Stew Webb's evidence in this regard. I had also talked to Anthony Sanchez about some of this information, and so on a previous video you would have gotten some of that information, also my radio show and my other interviews with Anthony, who has also been investigating this line of research. However, Stu has different information. He was involved in investigating the whole PROMIS software from the early days, from what I understand. Isn't that right? Along with Ted Gunderson, who was involved in, well, my understanding is he was involved in helping the investigation into this. You seem to have some different information in that regard. But let's start at the beginning. Before we go in that direction, can we start with describing the PROMIS software as you understand it, what went on, and how that leads to the whole, rollout of using drug money for black projects, etc.
Well, I had come across way back in 1991 a gentleman by the name of Bill McCoy. It was one of the Iran-Contra famous investigators. He was also the private investigator for Private Tyree, for Terry Reid. He testified in the Reid trial, that wrote the book Clinton, Bush, and the CIA, a good friend of mine. He also worked for Ed Wilson, who was charged in the Libyan sales of weapons under ESCO. So Bill knew what was going on. He was familiar with a lot of stuff. I had been in Bill's house a couple of times, and I saw and know of and have a lot of the documentation, or some of the documentation Bill had shared with me. I worked with him over the years until 1997 when he was killed over the exposure of Strassmeyer, the German connection, on the Oklahoma City bombing case. So Bill had also been the private investigator after he left the IG's office at the Pentagon in the 70s and retired. He had been the private investigator for the Hamilton family, who was the Inslaw engineer. They had created the Inslaw software, and it was a special software and you had to have a disk, a hard disk, in order to use it. It was called PROMIS, and it was for the purpose of tracking white-collar crime within the Justice Department. The Justice Department agreed at the time to buy it for $200 million from the Hamilton family, including, the disk that they need, the hard disk to operate it. And they actually stole it, never paid him. And it was bizarre because they had a congressional investigation on it, and they said it was the most bizarre thing that they had ever seen, that the Justice Department itself was stealing the software, et cetera. It's all been in the press in the past. Now, what had happened with Inslaw over the years, I had found out, is that they took the Inslaw software, and here's where it ties to Ted Gunderson. Gunderson's name had been floating around among different people saying, oh, he's a good guy. He helps guys like you, Stu. I'd heard about it clear back in 91 when I was hiding from the FBI before they made me a political prisoner in 92 to 93, and then dismissed the charges to shut me up. Well, I came across the guy in 94, and I thought, it's kind of flaky and all this other stuff. And then in 95, 96 time frame, came across him a few more times, and, he seemed legit. His so-called concern. He was a good fake. He's dead now, and thank God, and I wish him the best of luck in hell, because that's where the bastard is, and that's where he belonged on what he did. He was a pedophile. I talked to his ex-wife. He was actually nearly charged for raping some 14-year-old kid.
Okay, I'm sorry, Stu, who are we talking about here?
Ted Gunderson. He ties to Inslaw. Now,
okay, so you're accusing him of being a pedophile?
There's a girl that was raped by him that was in a satanic family when she was about 14 years of age. It will be published in Dave Hinson's book, where they had set him up, wateroz.com. DaveHinson.com. It ties into more stuff. But the deal is, Gunderson was filthy. He would always go around and he would pick guys like me to do a video with. As an example, I want to hear your story. I'm Ted Gunderson. He started floating into what they called the patriot community in the 1994, 1995 time frame, infiltrating people. Gene Chip Tatum, who was CIA, had come public with me in 1995, 1996 time frame. Of course, Ted Gunderson shows up at a couple of global science meetings, videotaping Gunderson. They're floating around on the internet now. He did it with Kathy O'Brien. He did it with many people. She was one of the ones being raped by pedophile George Herbert Walker Bush, etc. Transformationofamerica.com is her website.
Right.
So Gunderson has been all over the board with a lot of people. He's there to infiltrate. He infiltrated me in 1997, 1998 time frame. I actually lived at his place for 9 months. I was in Vegas. He wanted to have a meeting. He says, Stu, I hear you're hanging out with someone. He says, I've got an empty condo up here on a 5th-story floor, and he says, I need somebody to keep an eye on it. He says, I'm without a car. I blew this engine in my Cadillac. I'm without a car. You got a vehicle. And he says, we could help each other. Well, at that time, I did not know that he was an infiltrator and that he was trying to infiltrate me to find out what I knew. And he turned around, and I booked him on many radio shows. I was probably doing one a day of an average 5 days a week during that period of time, nationally broadcast stations when you could get on them. So I put him on a few. Well, while I was there in that period of time, I started seeing some really shaky stuff. And during the beginning, he was hanging out at Clint Murchison's house. Clint Murchison was the Dallas Cowboys. He also was the CIA broker between the CIA and the FBI. His father's house, Clint Murchison Sr., is where they had all the killers before the murder of Kennedy And right after Kennedy got murdered, all of them show up at Clint Murchison Sr.'s house, toasting and bragging and carrying on about how the murder went down.
Okay, now hold on one second, because you know this how?
I know it because Ted Gunderson, when Clint Jr. died, Clint Murchison had a maid named Anna Mae Newman. Anna Mae Newman is now dead. But Anna Mae Newman sat up at Ted Gunderson's condo there in Las Vegas, Nevada with me, and I showed her pictures of different people and some files I had and so forth. And she says, oh, yeah, he was one of the ones at the party. He was one of the ones at the party, etc. She was there the night before they killed him and the night or later on in the afternoon after they killed Kennedy. So they were all there. What was interesting is when Murchison died, he left in his will for Ted Gunderson to be the one to guard his house and to help settle the estate of the house. In exchange, he would pay him money. He also left Anna Mae Newman, who was an illegal immigrant from Ireland, who's never had a visa or passport, was in the United States. She was nearly 70-some-odd years of age. This was back in the late 1990s. She inherited from Clint Murchison nearly $80,000. Gunderson conned her out of her money, $70,000 of it. Oh, May, I can help you. Or I can pay you back. I've got a case that's going to pay me $200,000 was always his famous words. And that I need the money because I can really help these children that are being kidnapped and raped and all this, tied to the Franklin cover-up in Nebraska and all this. He lied to her. He took the money, he spent the money, he paid off a house he had in California that his daughter was living in, and the whole bit. I checked about Ted Gunderson. I called his ex-wife, Jocelyn. Talked to her. She had 4 children by him. Gunderson was diagnosed in 1972 or 71 before she divorced him as a paranoid schizophrenia. His daughter has the same problem. His son, Ted Sr., has the same problem.
Okay, well, before we, because I appreciate that, but at this moment, when you're saying that, did this Anna Mae, is that what you call her?
Anna Mae Newman.
Yeah, is she the one who told you that he took her money?
Yes, she did.
I see.
And he took her money. And he framed me later, or tried to frame me with the police department in Las Vegas and a SWAT team and nearly kill me. And he got this killer, he got off of charges in Las Vegas named Tom Gall that had murdered 2 people. He got him off because Gunderson was promised $200,000 by him out of his mother's estate, that Gunderson would be the trustee of the estate, etc. She was in a nursing home. If he could wrestle these documents or get these documents through someone who Gunderson had asked me to check on a Jared Schaefer, who was dirty, public administrator, in charge of old people and their money. And it turns out to be he had been stealing for years. There was a PI, former CI that became PI, had a bunch of documents. He wanted $4,000 for the documents. I kept telling Gunderson it costs you $4,000 if you want these documents. He says, oh, no, and he tried to blackmail me, actually blackmail me and extort me to get the documents by bringing these false assault charges against Tom Gall. It's a long story. In the bottom of the link that's in this link that I've asked people to go to, that's breaking news today, Project Camelot, you interviewing me, it says Ted Gunderson. Click on that link, go all the way to the bottom. I actually had to put restraining orders on Ted Gunderson, Anna Mae Newman, because she was lying, trying to get her money back, in behalf of Ted, and in behalf of this character, Tom Gall, who's walking free as a result of Ted Gunderson. That guy sat there and admitted to me he blew these 2 people away, but yet, and it wasn't self-defense. It was the fact that he owed $150 to 2 guys that came to his door to collect their money for moving some stuff for him. And he shot him at the front door, at his front door. And Gunderson went in there and testified. I'm a former FBI, I'm a licensed PI out of California. And he made up all this crap. And there was a girl with Westward newspaper in Las Vegas who had interviewed and saw all this. And she witnessed things because, I was kind of like over at Ted's after I moved out of there. I was over there on occasion. He would ask me to watch Anna Mae Newman and so forth, keep an eye on her when he was out of town. So I was just doing it. But I knew there was some things wrong. And I'd learned that he had been a Iran-Contra player. Al Martin found out about it. He said that Al Martin riled Ockham, the Iran-Contra whistleblower, and Stephen Dennerstein, the famous Iran-Contra investigator, as Al's mentioned several times in his book and other things, had found out that attorney generals all around the United States had found that Ted Gunderson was ripping off money from little old ladies consistently. He was going in and supposedly helping them. There was one gal during
Okay. But look, I appreciate this, but we need to come back to the subject at hand. You've given enough background, I think, on why you think Gunderson was not, I guess, on the up and up, so to speak. So at this moment, can we get back to PROMIS software and basically follow that line out, because it really has to do with Michael Riconosciuto and what went on with the PROMIS software, how it was basically sold to the Mossad and became a profiling software for use really worldwide by the governments.
It's not only used by the governments, it's also used privately, and I'll explain it. There is a document in that document I've referred to, the Project Camelot. Right below Ted Gunderson, you'll see a document that says Ted Gunderson selling Stinger missiles to Osama bin Laden, which he did. This was when he was kicked out of the FBI in 1979 for holding satanic ceremonies in the FBI office. They diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia for a second time. They put him in early retirement. He was the crossover between CIA and FBI. When Gunderson left, he had sold those Stinger missiles during that period of time while he was ahead of the FBI office out there in L.A. That document proves it. That's an internal memorandum. I can't say where I got it. It's an internal memorandum of the United States government given to me by a spook. If you notice in that document, I'm not looking at it right now. I'm looking at a still picture of you, Kerry, because of the camera. But if you look at that document, it talks about Stinger missiles. And it mentions Michael Riconosciuto in there. It mentions the word Inslaw in there, and it also refers to a neutron bomb in the bottom of the document. These were items that they were peddling in behalf of the George Bush crime syndicate, part of Black Ops, illegal Black Ops, using the FBI, Division Number 5, which he was and was after retirement, interconnected in with dirty CIA. Now, here's where Inslaw went down. Michael Riconosciuto was a brilliant guy. I mean, I met him when I was in prison through a transfer station in El Reno, Oklahoma, and when they were shuffling me around. We saw each other for nearly 4 hours, 2 to 4 hour time frame. I had an opportunity to get my ear filled real quick, and I asked him what it was all about. He told me. And he had done a lot. Then later I came across the gal who, Jackie McGauley, the McMartin preschool case, if you remember the name, Ted Gunderson says, oh, you know, when I left the FBI, I tried to help kids, the McMartin preschool case. He was there to cover up. The day they were digging in to prove there was a tunnel running from the McMartin over to a Catholic church set across the street or next door. Kids were being taken out, they're drugged and used by pedophiles. They were selling them. Well, Gunderson's there to cover it up. He tried to kill Jackie. Jackie she actually met Michael Riconosciuto's father, etc. You can bring her on one of these days in an interview, but to give it to you in a nutshell, I've come across not only her and a lot of evidence she accumulated during that period of time that was Gunderson's stuff. That Gunderson rips her off, the whole 9 yards. There's in these documents I just put into this link. You'll see the stuff where he ran up her phone bill. He stole credit cards from her, tried to kill her, murder her. There's even a statement from her a few years back about all this. Gunderson was operating out of Cabazon Indian Reservation, where Danny Castle back in 1990 and 91 was doing investigations of what he called the Octopus. He was working with my good friend Bill McCoy, which I mentioned earlier, the private investigator. Bill had worked with Terry Reid also in his book and gave him a lot of the stuff for his book, Clinton Bush and the CIA. Bill McCoy was the PI for the Hamiltons. Bill, the night that Danny Casolaro, that was going to write about the Octopus, his book, Name of the Octopus, was down the street to the hotel room from Bill's house. He had a box of documents. Bill gets a call from the local police because they've got Bill's card out there. Danny, when they found him dead, they found Bill's card. So they called him up. He rushed down there, and a lot of the documents were gone that he had given him a box of his to go down there that night, take what he wants, make copies, which he had a portable printer in the whole 9 yards, and for his book, because Bill was the investigator on this. Now, Gunderson even admitted to me when I was there at his place for a short period of time. He admitted to me knowing Castlear. Oh yeah, I talked to him. Well, I talked to Danny too myself, because Bill had said he wanted to talk to me about Leonard Millman, my ex-in-laws, and about money laundering on Silverado and some other stuff I had, which I talked to him. Well, when I would mention to Gunderson, I'd say to Gunderson towards the last one, I got suspicious of this guy. I said, what do you know about Castellero? He says, oh, well, I've talked to him a couple times on the phone, that's all. Well, what'd you talk to him about? He wouldn't ever get into detail. The problem was Castellero was on to the fact that there was a group was George Pender of the CI, Intercontinental Investment Corp., which the documents in that page link that I made for you and for your listeners for tonight. Also, Gunderson, George Pender of the CIA. Also, George Pender and Ted Gunderson not only were involved in Capison, they were involved in the blackmail congressmen that were senators, which ties into John DeCamp and the Franklin cover-up, which was to try to limit the liability just to the Franklin cover-up, the Franklin savings loan up there, Larry King.
Okay, hold on one second, because you're going too fast. I'm sorry. We just need to slow you down a little bit here and back up, because a lot of people are not going to be able to keep track of all these names. And I know that this it is an octopus, okay. And I've read I read Danny's book. I'm in the middle of reading The Last Circle. I read Sherry Seymour, who is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, the last word on most of the research in this area, and she did an amazing job.
She did. I've read a lot of the stuff. Yes, I'm familiar with her.
Okay, so at this moment, can we just back up? So what happens with? I'm sorry.
I'll narrow it down to Capison. We had Ted Gunderson, George Pender. We have Michael Riconosciuto's dad, and we had another very interesting player by the name of Raymond Lavis.
Okay, well, there's also Nichols.
Robert Nichols. There were two Robert Nichols. One was an author, and one was a Capison player.
Right. Well, no. Robert Nichols was this sort of James Bond, character who was something like larger than life, and then there is something like a John Robert Nichols, who is this guy who was, as you say, in the employ of the Cabazon reservation, from what I understand. But I'm curious to get to deal with this box of documents that you were talking about, because you started to kind of go off there explaining what was going on with the documents, but you weren't really explaining what happened that night to Danny, because that's when he was killed.
Okay, I'm sorry. What happened is they killed him. Somebody came in and murdered him.
Okay, but he took this box of documents back to his hotel room to make copies?
To make copies and go through what he wanted for his book.
I understand.
Bill was the private investigator for the Hamilton family that had created the Inslaw software.
Right. And so Danny took the documents. What happened to the documents, the box of documents, when Danny was found in his hotel room, I guess the next day, having been suicided he was found in the bathtub, from what I remember?
Yes, that's correct. What happened to it was they disappeared, but thank God Bill McCoy had them backed up. He had everything he ever owned backed up.
I see.
Okay, so those documents, matter of fact, McCoy being dead, those documents still are in existence. I'll just put it that way.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I understand that there's some background on those documents. Okay, so at that, but a lot of people don't know who Michael Riconosciuto is, and he is actually primary because he was the one who reverse engineered or created the backdoors into the Inslaw software and so on.
Yes, and he did create that, and Michael was later arrested for running a meth lab, which Gunderson also tried to get him out of it, presenting fake DEA agent documents to testify.
Well, my understanding is that that was a setup, because Michael Riconosciuto was actually, well, he was quite brilliant, and he was involved in all sorts of things, including, I guess, building weapons on the reservation. They were creating they had a weapons lab, and they also had a bio weapons lab. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was a 5-story below-ground weapons lab out there since, I believe, in the early 50s that was hidden out there by the government and the U.S. government. And yes, I remember Michael talking to me about the weapon he built, something that would shoot like a 3-mile round. It's accurate, something similar to what people in the CIA call the 50 caliber with the scope. It's the solution, quote unquote. Okay, he had come up with a round that would go 3 miles out of an M16. They were working on a lot of toys, but it was all tied to General John Singelov, which most people don't know this about Inslaw. He and George Pender of the CIA that's in that document that I put inside that link, just below the link that says Ted Gunderson. I don't have it on my screens here. In that document, it shows the, and I'll pull it up, but it shows the George Penderson and Cabazon, Intercontinental, etc. But Penderson was high up in the CIA, working for Daddy Bush, Black Ops. He was very dirty, Kerry. But they were involved in so much stuff out there. But the significance that I would bring tonight. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. What I just want to, keep sort of slowing you down a bit, because you obviously have this stuff in your mind, which is quite amazing. You have volumes of information in your mind, and it makes sense to you, but I just want to, go over these details so that we don't lose the threads, because some of this stuff is really, really important. So, so what you've got is this group of characters, and you've got basically them working for the CIA. Wackenhut is also involved, right? You haven't mentioned them.
Yes, they are involved. A lot of this old stuff to me, it's it's kind of like your brain gets overloaded to a point. Your library card expires, as Daddy Bush says. Your brain gets overloaded. It's like I went back and started pulling up these documents to put them in this link and created for the show tonight, and it started refreshing my memory on about stuff.
Yeah, well, it's pretty incredible stuff when you look at all of it. So what the bottom line is, though, is that all of this links somehow to drug running, correct?
It does, and they were doing a massive drug running out of Santa Monica Bay, and it was part of Iran-Contra. It was down to Mexico and so forth. It was a western part into Nicaragua. This was and drugs that were coming from Baja California, on the southern tip of Baja California. There was a big, huge airstrip that General John Singelov owned, and it was a piece of ground. And matter of fact, in 1991, he landed his 707 airplane down there with an engine burning up, and it was on fire as they landed in because they were overloaded with cocaine. And the DEA spotted it, who had agents on the ground down there, and they went in there and they confiscated the drugs, and they confiscated the airplane and arrested a couple of pilots. And that airplane, ironically, was turned over to the DEA for sale, and General John Singelov bought his own airplane back, if you can believe this. This is how corrupt the government is.
Right.
But
okay. But what happened...
where they were hauling the drugs up to Santa Monica, California. And when Ted Gunderson was in charge of the FBI, that's where the overlay in 78, 79, back in the late 70s, that was the overlay of the Cabazon and covering up for them and the drugs that were going out of Santa Monica. There's one more significant part about this that a lot of people don't know: trafficking in children. There were a lot of kidnapped girls from California that ended up missing and going to Nicaragua. And they were via Santa Monica back to the drug base and then being flown down to Nicaragua. So,
Okay. All right. And so, but in terms of the Cabazon reservation, because this is where the Black projects, this is for people that are listening that are Camelot viewers, where we become particularly interested is when it crosses over into Black projects, and the fact that they use the Indian reservations as the location for where they established these labs. And Michael Riconosciuto was very involved in all of that. What was going on with the software? Do you know a lot about the software? In other words, the trail, that how it got into the hands of the Mossad and what they did with it after that?
Well, it basically was handed over by Daddy Bush from the Attorney General's office, and it was then used for drug trafficking. Matter of fact, when they had me as a political prisoner and doing a psycho evaluation on me, which said nothing was the matter with me, in Springfield, Missouri, which is Siberia, USA, where they hold all the political prisoners, DEA agent Bo Abbott, who was a pilot flying Central America looking for drugs, been compromised to fly weapons, and how they did him was that they loaded him up, told him they needed to do his patriotic duty and fly some weapons to the Congress. So he did it, pick up the cash in duffel bags, bring it back. He brings it back to DEA headquarters in Addison, Texas, off the Beltline Road, where it's a secure place, and they start unloading these duffel bags. He opens up one of them, it's full of cocaine, and he didn't know it. He flew in, let him take the weapons, grab the other, and they compromised him at that point. Said, "You're going to start doing this for us, or you're going to prison the rest of your life for hauling drugs." Well, he knew he was screwed. So he got his wife out of the country, not his wife, but his pregnant girlfriend out of the country. Bo Abbott, he's in the book Defrauding America, and he talks about this regarding the INSLAW software.
Well, I don't understand. How does the INSLAW software relate to the drugs? Because I've heard it in other capacities.
White House, Vice President's house, when George Bush was Vice President, and he picked up software. And these were financials on the software. These were drug accounts and other things that Daddy Bush was putting on the software on disks and sending off with certain people to fly to Central America. He met with Noriega on several times, Bo Abbott did, delivered him a disk of his drug money to know where his CIA or his drug accounts were in Switzerland. So they would use couriers. Bo Abbott was used. Here he was, a DEA pilot. He was used as a courier. When he went public with this, they murdered his girlfriend, and she had just delivered their child. Their child was only 45 days old. He adopted the child out, came back to the United States, decided he was going to try to do something, get a congressman or senator to do something, and he found out it was way bigger than what he thought. And next thing you know, Bo Abbott's being arrested. His whole story's in defraudingamerica.com. But he flew INSLAW software down to Noriega with his money in it. Now, not only were they using that, but they also had the backdoor trap, what they called, where they could tap into your accounts. They could use your money overnight, put your money back, use it for 3 days while the weekend was shut down.
So you're saying, I'm just going to stop you here, because you are now saying that PROMIS software is also being used in the trading programs.
Yes, in overnight trading with currency and other things. It has been for years. Daddy Bush, we call him.
Okay.
George Walker Bush.
Right.
Also Poppy Bush. Okay, he's been doing it for years, him and his cronies. Now, where the bigger picture comes in INSLAW that I'm aware of comes from this. And this is the reason Ted Gunderson pulls in so heavily. Gunderson had an office in Las Vegas in 1994 before I ever got really, tied up closer to him, should we say, and promoting him on the radio and so forth, because he seemed sincere. He was a liar. He was a fake. He was an infiltrator. But in 1994, he had a little office in Las Vegas. In the back of his office was Raymond Lamas. Now, this is going to probably get Raymond pretty ticked off, but Raymond, too bad. You were dirty. Raymond Lamas worked for the NSA. It was the overlay with Gunderson and Raymond Lamas' name does not appear in that Stinger document, and I'm surprised because he was doing a lot of stuff. He worked with Michael Reconnaissance and all the others. Raymond was the one that was the unknown source in Black Sun book. It was his book. I saw the entire transcript of the book before it was ever published. And I said, Raymond, you got to publish this thing. Because he had kind of like turned on him, sort of. Now.
Wait, who had turned on who?
Raymond had turned on the Bushes.
I see.
On everyone else. But Black Sun, he's the unknown source for the book Black Sun.
Which deals with what?
Which deals with a lot of different stuff that ties to Area 51, ties to Capason, ties
Oh,
to
you're talking about Peter Moon's Black Sun.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Raymond Lovis worked for Ted Gunderson at the FBI, was working out of that office, answering to Ted Gunderson. When he was, after he retires in 1994, he's in the back shop of Ted Gunderson's office in Las Vegas, Nevada, out by the airport, and he's got a big cage out there, and he's got all this equipment behind it. He's got this big sign and a big padlock on it. It was kind of ironic, but it said, this property belongs to the NSA, etc. And I asked, I said, Raymond, I said, did you work for the NSA? And I got to know him quite well. He came to my house. I got to know him for 6 months. He let me, read his transcript. He wanted my opinion of things. But Raymond was over there building sunglasses where they were, as an example, he was putting cameras inside for the DEA, and had a contract for the DEA, Customs, and the others, putting little hidden cameras inside for the police departments around the country. In the back shop of Ted Gunderson's, they had a multi-million-dollar contract. But I had driven him out to California and had talked to him because he wanted me to meet a couple of people, and I'm not going to get into any of that because I don't want to. One of them became a source on a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Now, Raymond went into hiding a long time ago, and I don't want to get into that, but here's what I learned from Raymond. Raymond, when Michael Reconnaissance was arrested and basically set up to shut him up, Michael Reconnaissance, since 24 years in prison or whatever, I have his affidavit, by the way, in this document. If people really get in here and search, I'm kind of glancing now, but his affidavit, it was imprisonment, his court case, and all the stamp filing, everything's right in there of what he did. Raymond took over the Inslaw software affair. What they were working on is they were trying to figure out how to use the Inslaw software to not only create the back door, which they did, but they were trying to figure out a way to use it on U.S. satellites. Because Daddy Bush had privatized during his regime, and that's all it was his regime, not a presidency. He privatized what was called the West Star series of satellites. There was about 8 to 12 satellites.
Okay.
Plus-size satellites. These were real sophisticated satellites, still in orbit today, still being used. I mean, there's 20,000 satellites up there or something now today. But West Star, Raymond was in charge and put up at a Washington naval base, where it's a sub base up in Washington State, where they had several scientists that were working out of it. Raymond was Jason's society, just like Michael Reconnaissance. They were brilliant. Neither one of them graduated from high school, as I understood, or ever went to college. They were just brain children. They had super high IQs.
Right.
And Raymond demonstrated it. Like Einstein never combed his hair or whatever. I mean, he looked like a old hippie at the time. Raymond looked about the same.
Okay.
Is Ray Lovis sat up there. He says, Stewie, he says it was bizarre. He said that he told me the whole story one night having a couple beers at my place. He said that they had put him up there, was paying him like, I don't know how many thousands a week, couple 3,000 a week. He was making enormous money. Paying him with cash from drug. A drug courier would bring him his cash on a naval base. And then he said that they put him in a villa, a little 2-bedroom villa, up there. And he said, here he's got scientists walking around in that area. And he said they'd walk up to him and say, well, who are you? And he'd say, I'm Raymond Lovis. Well, what is your degree in? which is scientific area are you working? He says, oh, I'm just working some stuff for, black ops for the agency. Oh, well, what's your degree? He says, I'm a dropout of high school, and they couldn't believe it. Anyway, the point is Ray said he told him what he wanted, that he wanted this, this equipment and that equipment. He needed this equipment. He says all of a sudden they bring this huge shipping container in and by helicopter and set it down in his front yard of his villa. That was his office with all of his equipment in it, and told him to take his time and setting everything up, of which he did. They gave him a car. He had several antennas on it and a special plate on the car. They told him not to leave the base except if he wanted to go to the local 7-Eleven or Quick Trip or something like that.
Okay, and I remember that we covered this in my last interview with you, but what I want to know is, how does it link up to the satellites?
Okay, here's what he did. After 7 years, he figured out how to take that INSLAW software and make light change in midair, twist, make sound, twist in midair, make it go in any direction. They can actually take and turn it in midair and make it go the direction they want. So they can come down, Kerry, alongside of your house with a beam, and all of a sudden it twists and it goes right into your window. And they're listening and seeing everything you're doing. Now, they tied the PROMIS software into these Westar series of satellites, the INSLAW software.
Okay.
They're able to, and have been, through E-Systems of Dallas, Texas, a private contractor for the U.S. government that Ollie North testified that was part of the quote-unquote company during the Iran-Contra hearings and said no more.
Right.
Now, that INSLAW, or that E-Systems is owned by Raytheon Corp, Daddy Bush's company. E-Systems, that INSLAW, they made it to where that they can watch you and listen to you through cable TV. They can watch you, listen to you. They can listen to you through your telephone, even though your phone's hung up. The only way that you can have private conversation in your own home is to unplug your telephone from the wall. Otherwise, they can hear you. If you have your cable hooked up with the new TV, high definition TV, and if you remember this is significant. Several years back, 10, 12 years ago, they wouldn't let Japanese TVs come into America and other TVs unless they had that special chip in the TV they call high definition. Because that chip would allow them to be able to look at you through your own TV. So, folks, you got your cable hooked up, and the government wants to see you, and your TV, whether it's on or off, as long as your cable box is hooked up or you're hooked into your cable, they can watch you making love in your own bedroom to your wife. So the government, Big Brother's been in our houses since I understand, since the mid-90s.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, though, Stu. It's probably also able to use the cameras in computers, isn't that right?
I understand that is correct. They can do it through the internet. They can watch us right through your cameras. And matter of fact, they're saying they can do it through your computer screen. Whether they can or not, I don't know. I haven't been, hooked into that INSLAW stuff for years, but I've heard that.
Well, it's very interesting. Okay, but so the satellite INSLAW link up is to make this, to operate the satellites. Is that correct?
The INSLAW was to make those satellites to where Daddy Bush and his New World Order puppets can watch everybody and listen to everybody.
Okay, but they must also have a military application that they use those satellites for, and the software for beyond that, right?
Yes, and they had a back trap door. You're refreshing my memory with conversations with reconnaissance officers. They were doing that because they put the trap door back in the back of that. I forgot which country it was at the time because they were spying on that country. But they've been able to do that. And what's interesting is they sold that software to like every military NATO and everybody throughout the world, all part of NATO, all the different militaries use that software, that INSLAW, and they were able to put that back trap door in it to where they knew what they were doing, whether they were reporting back to NATO or not. That was something that, I'm glad you reminded me of this, something that was significant about that. But there's something else about the software people don't know, is that, and this is where I believe they controlled the elections for 20 years, is they have used that. Now, there's a link I sent to you, Kerry. I did not put it up in that posting, and after we get off the air tonight, I'll put it in this posting where everybody can see it. There's two significant links, but here's where they're at right now on my internet.
Okay, I have posted, I'm giving them to my webmaster to post in the chat. I believe that's at least one of the emails you gave me had two links.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was an earlier, if there's some other links that I haven't found, but I've only got two links on a recent email from you.
Right, there was one at the very top of the email I sent to you earlier, and that's a link that's on the breaking news that people are probably viewing right now. These other two links, where they can find them, is under table of contents, third column over from the right. Scroll all the way down past alphabetical order, and you start seeing a bunch of stories in there by Tom Flacco. In one of those stories down towards the middle, it talks about U.S. satellites going to, U.S. intelligence and other intelligence agency, meaning Interpol, are going to monitor the elections. I believe that was in 2004 they did that. And where they got that from was because of my knowledge of Im's Law. I mentioned in that story. Now, I found out that they were taking and changing the voting booths. If you remember that they were, and Raymond had told me this, that's the reason they were doing electronic voting booths, set them up in Arizona and Nevada and other western states at the time that I knew Raymond Lavis, because they were able to take that and say if Harry Reid lost by 10,000 votes, they could flip the vote before the night's out on the electronic voting machine and say he won by 10,000 or 20,000 votes. They were able to do that by the West Star satellite. Now, I'm pretty positive that this has gone on since the time that they initiated, sometime in the mid-90s.
Okay, that's very interesting. I just want to stop you there because I just want you to repeat that again. So using the PROMIS software linked up with the West Star satellites, they were able to change the votes.
They've been able to change the votes on every national election and state election since the early to mid-90s when they installed it in the West Star system and incorporated it. They're part of. Now, what was interesting, Kerry, was I think this was 2004 election, and that was the year that Nancy Pelosi became the head of the House up there, and all the Democrats got in. And if you remember, during that election, all these I call them shitheads that are on national TV, okay, on all the major networks, where the political pundits were in there talking about the fact that the Republicans didn't win, and it was like they were reading from a script of they should have won, but what happened they couldn't figure out. Here's what happened. We put out in advance that U.S. was going to be monitored by internal and external Interpol and good guys in our government. We're going to monitor this. Now, here's the funny part that went down, and I'm aware of all this because I had Flacco write the story before the election, hoping that they would be stupid enough to go ahead and do it and get caught. I've been trying to get friends of mine in various agencies, CIA, NSA, the other agencies that have satellites, Interpol, France, and they're joined forces with us during this, and I thank you, France, our ally and our sister. They brought their Sputniks over and parked it over America. It's in, I don't know whether it's actually in that story, but the night of the morning of the election, or a few days before the election in Texas, Lubbock, Texas, or someplace where they had early voting, they saw that West Star had popped a beam down and changed the voting booth. And they're going, oh, shit, Stew's right. It really is happening. Well, that was the first one. So they decided to keep that little Sputnik satellite up there, and they were going to ensure we got a good election. So the night of the elections, this was the wild part. Night of the elections, here comes West Star, and they're coming up over, and they're setting up, and they're already popping voting booths with numbers before people even went to the election booths. Our friends and allies said, screw you. You commit treason and sedition. Bam! You can see and go back to mainstream press. We had a satellite fall out of air and out of orbit within 6 weeks, come back to America, bus-sized satellite. A second one was popped on election day, and that night they came in. The Russian and Chinese were brought in by Daddy Bush to pop out Sputniks, and that didn't happen. It happened to be that an NSA satellite chased off the Chinese, or it was a British satellite and a Chinese satellite. They chased those off. That was during the night before the election. Sputniks remained in the sky, our friends, France, and they made sure that we had a legal election. And it's in that posting where we had warned them in advance it was going to happen. Now, there was a second West Star satellites that was shot out of the air during that day on that Tuesday of election. It was shot out of the air. So there were two that were lost. But they were committing treason and sedition against the American people. So therefore, that's what our agreement with George Washington and Lafayette was about. Protect each other. And it happened. Now, the next election, major election, 2008 presidential election with Obama and the others, they were up there again. This time, people in the CIA says, we're putting our satellite up there too. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen with West Star. Guess what they did? The NSA, the dirty section of it, Daddy Bush and his gang, which is about 80% of it, went out to the voting booths that they didn't cover the ground. U.S. intelligence and other intelligence, Interpol, did not cover the ground well enough. And they found out that they ran around and they already had the voting booths all fixed and the elections all fixed with the chips in the voting booths, the electronic voting booths. So that's what happened, and that's how West Star ties to E-Systems and vote fraud. We have not had a legal, clean election other than that one that's in that story that Tom Flacco wrote about in advance, warning them, don't use the West Star satellite system or you lose a couple satellites. That's what happened.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's very, very interesting. Well, what this also does, though, it links this software into what Anthony Sanchez has been investigating, which is this network of nanosatellites that's now up there that are low Earth orbiting satellites. Now, if they're nano, it's not so easy for these for them to be messed with, I imagine. And not only that, but my understanding from what he said is that these nanosatellites are run by an AI, and the AI is it's self-replicating, and it also defends itself, so that those satellites can now defend themselves.
Well, I don't doubt that because of the nanotechnology and the other things, and this ties in again with Papoose Lake and the alien connection, what they call the alien connection at Papoose Lake, and the technology that's been developed. Some of this technology is so far off the charts, Kerry. I mean, I'm not even, I've got sources, but I don't have, a scientist like I used to have out there. He's now dead, was killed, Ed Slade back in October, etc. He was credited for, he worked with the aliens, but he was credited for the lunar landing on the moon.
Who are you talking about?
Ed Slade.
I'm sorry?
Ed Slade, he was a former U.S. scientist that created in 90 days the lunar landing, to be able to land on the moon itself. And as he said, Stu, he says, here they gave me credit for that. They built it and everything, and they never used it. Instead, they used anti-gravity, Tesla, alien technology when they landed on the moon. I said, they never blew any dust up off the moon.
Okay, says, well, wait. Do you have testimony from this guy, Ed Slade? Do you have it documented anywhere?
Yes, I do have in several radio programs that we did before his death back in the summer. Another broadcaster, Freedom Fighters for America. It's on my front page. Scroll down where it says whistleblowers. You see Ed Slade. It says whistleblower radio. And on there, click on that and start listening to those interviews. I think we did 3 or 4 interviews, and And Ed, it was kind of interesting about Ed. He was one of the 6 scientists that developed a lot of flying saucer technology and a lot of the other stuff. And they all ended up dead, all in 6 months, except for Ed. And he stood up with Bo Gritz at a meeting in Reno, Nevada, and did a speech. He had come public because his colleagues were all dying, and he knew he was going to die, and he was going to blast his mouth off as much as he could. And they shot him with some kind of a weapon from the audience, and hit him in the head. It gave him a cerebral hemorrhage and everything. And he was actually in a coma for several years, 2 or 3 years, and came out of the coma. And then later I got to meet him through some people that knew him, and we became good friends. We talked, I mean, many, many, many times. The day that I found out I didn't even know he was buried. He had a brother that answered his cell phone and says, "I buried him today." I'm like, "Oh my God, I haven't talked to him in a week." And he said they were after him. And he said it was the invisible men, as he used to call them. They could put on some kind of a big metal cloak, and they had a little, like the Og meter on them that they used for space-time and the Montauk Project and so forth. They could do that and become invisible. He called them the invisible men. This was stuff that had been around the technology for years. They could walk, actually, the matter, they could walk through walls with this type of technology on them, and they were constantly coming in his place's apartment in Las Vegas, taking what he had in there. He was trying to put up documents before his death relating to a lot of his work and get them to me so we could put them up on the internet. I have some of the stuff, but I don't have all of it. And I have
really?
Some of the stuff, yes.
Very, very interesting. Okay, well, that's an interesting twist, I have to say. So to get back to the the Octopus and what was going on the reservation, do you know about the bioweapons?
I know that there were 5 floors down there, and I know that they were doing a lot of bioweapons. The extent of that, I don't have any idea what they were doing there, Kerry. I could tell you about Iraq Gate, because that was all developed in Colorado. It wasn't developed there. And it became the Iraq Gate scandal, and then it became the B&L Bank scandal when it re-resurrected, and then it became the Gulf War syndrome scandal, and that's where Millman and Bush and all of them were selling biological agents to Iraq illegally, shipping it through Mercedes-Benz Corporation out of Germany, going to the Israelis, who then would put it on the trucks, the Mercedes trucks that were going to Israel, and then shipping it up to Saddam Hussein. So you had the Mossad broker and Netanyahu gang brokering all these biological chemicals to Iraq. Later used them in Scud missiles on our troops during the Gulf War I. And when they were all contaminated, they never could figure out what it was they were contaminated with. Garth Nicholson, the doctor, had come up with the fact that they had anthrax. He even got a government grant. There was a nurse named Joyce Riley who later, should we say, in my opinion, became a spin doctor for the government. She got infiltrated. But they were
okay. Why do you think, I want to back you way up because I want to talk about the beginning of what you just said, Iraq Gate, whatever, and how they were selling biological weapons to Iraq before the war. That's quite interesting. I want to follow that trail, but I'd like you to explain. You just said Joyce Riley was infiltrated. In what way?
Well, Peter Kowalczyk, who was an NSA investigator, looking at the fact that they were making biological chemical agents and they were being shipped out of a warehouse in Boca Raton, Florida, at the airport. This particular warehouse was owned by my former father-in-law, and the initials on the corporate papers had L. Millman, as in Leonard Millman, and N. Bush, as in Neil Bush. And it was the warehouse where Jeb Bush and Ollie North were storing drugs, weapons, and it was full of money. And there was somebody that was at that warehouse who said that when they were loading up the drug money, they had so much drug money that they had to stuff it in the trunk of the Lincoln Continental because they couldn't get the hangar doors closed because they had it stacked to the ceiling. There were billions of dollars in drug money from the Pier 66 Miami drug operation. That warehouse was used to ship these biological chemical weapons by Jeb Bush and others. Now, there was a reporter who did a whole series of stories, Ron Baird of the Colorado Daily, about this in 1997. I gave him the stories. He won a national award. Within a month, he nearly got killed, and he decided to go. He got fired, and he decided to go into hiding. The Colorado Daily did those newspaper articles, 6 or 8 story series of articles, because they were building the biological chemical agents of at Fruita, Colorado, at the Sam Gary refinery. And there's a big pond out there that sits right next to I-70 on the western slope. And if you've ever driven over it, it stinks to heaven. I mean, it's bad, the odor. I've driven from Vegas through there a few times into Colorado, and you got to hold your breath. That's some of the biological chemical agents. What they had in them was they had cyanide, HIV, hepatitis A, B, and or C, and cyanide. And this was what they did not find in the vets. They weren't looking for the heavy metal that was eating up their organs, and those that are still alive, maybe from Gulf War I, they're still having problems. You got to get the cyanide out of your blood. It's the whole key that eats up your organs. Now, they were building those weapons, or those biologicals. A reporter, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, that I talked to with the used to be with the Rocky Mountain News, saw him in person. He was discussing the fact that they were bringing it down in 55-gallon barrels from the Sam Gary refinery that he was able to still determine that it was still going on, and they were taking it out to a secret underground right outside of the Air Force Base at Aurora, Colorado. And they were shipping it in unmarked trucks and so forth, and the CIA, Daddy Bush's little group, was flying it out of Aurora, Colorado. Now, they sold those. They moved them to Boca Raton. Barbuti, the famous terrorist that's been dead on Interpol records a couple of times, who lives in Acapulco, Jordan, I might add, who's a coffee merchant over there, who was down there mixing, they called it the cherry juice. He was mixing a couple of the other ingredients, the hepatitis A, B, or C into it.
Okay, well, and sending, wait, I'm sorry, sending this stuff to Iraq?
Yes, they were shipping it over to Britain. They moved it through Britain. They moved it over to Israel, and they moved it from Israel on Mercedes trucks to Iraq. Now, this ties to Ted Gunderson. Years later, Ted Gunderson suddenly says, "Hey, Stu, why I'm there at his condo for that about 9-month period of time." He says, "You got sources?" He says, "I got this client, this lady from," and I put it in your document there, that has never been published, that I put up on the internet tonight. And if I don't have it, I was in a hurry trying to pack this thing up for you, Kerry. And if it isn't there, there's a few more documents I didn't get in there, and I'll put them up there. But she was a Mercedes dealer, her husband, in Germany. And they were trying to say that he had sold trucks to Iraq, after Gulf War I, they had several of the Mercedes, and Mercedes got in trouble big time all around the world over this, because they were missing trucks. They were saying that they had shipped into the United States, that some of the German dealers had actually shipped or had sold them. They weren't. Daddy Bush was buying them, shipping them over to Iraq via Israel. Here's Israel, supposed an enemy of Iraq, and they're involved. Daddy Bush and his little cronies, Netanyahu and others, are making sure, and illegal Mossad are making sure that this is shipped up to Iraq. But these had bill of ladings. Even inside the United States, several of the dealers were accused of shipping these trucks to Iraq, and they had nothing to do with it.
Okay, wait. So these are Mercedes trucks, and are they full of bio weapons? I mean, is this what you're saying?
Israel, and then they took these 55-gallon barrels of what they called cherry juice under a World Food Bank commodity exchange for oil type deal, with when Daddy Daddy Bush was president and before, and then they that's how they passed it through international, commerce type deal.
Okay, so they put the barrels on these trucks?
On these trucks and shipped them over there, and Iraq kept the Mercedes trucks. But these Mercedes, it's funny because Ted Gunderson says, "Hey, Stu, I got this client. What do you know about these Mercedes trucks?" She's claiming that her husband's being charged with supposedly selling these to Iraq, violation of, war crimes and whatever, So anyway, if these aren't the documents that are in there, I have the documents. I'll make sure they're put in this link tonight after we get off the air, and I'll light it up about Mercedes.
Okay,
Here's the rest of the story. Here's the rest of the story so you understand. Okay, Gunderson, I found out for him the truth about this. They were part of this Iraq-gate, of which I didn't even know. He collected $10,000 from this woman and did nothing for her except submit these 2 reports to her and then tell her that he couldn't do anything for her. I had people that were ready to light up Mercedes-Benz over this, and she was willing to pay out about $100,000 in the investigation. I said, Gunderson, get another 20 grand. My people, you pay them $10,000 a piece on this. I can't say now, if he were alive, he would be blowing his mouth off who they were, because he knew at the time who they were. He was infiltrating me, and I had a couple sources. But anyway, they were ready to light him up, and one of them was going to see to it, and he could have seen to it, that they would have been in deep, deep doo-doo over the Mercedes connection here in America. Because there were several dealers that were charged with crimes they never committed.
Okay, but to get back to the barrels of bioweapon, material, bioagents, whatever, that were being shipped to Iraq, what you're saying is that the bioweapon was created here in America, right?
Yes, it was created underneath an entity called Tricor of Dallas, Texas, TRICOR. And
okay,
actually, there's a document. There's a document on my breaking news page at the top. It says, "Wanted for treason and sedition." If you click on that link inside there, there's the story about what I've just described. There's also documents in there about shipping F-14 fighter jets out of St. Louis, Missouri. Counterintelligence of the FBI was locked up with me, shut him up. He had given me those documents. I verified it was all true. And they were shipping them to Iraq, and that's the reason Iraq had U.S. tanks as well as fighter jets.
Okay, and what year is this? Do you know what years?
This was the 1980s, all during Iran-Contra, where it was weapons and guns and everything. And there's been 2 times, I understand, from Al Martin, that when I had come across these or got the documents and later got to know Al in 91 while I was hiding from the FBI, and then when I was in prison in Springfield where all the 2,500 political prisoners were, that's when I had obtained these documents. And John Cole was the one that gave it to me. He's former intelligence, counterintelligence for the FBI, trying to bust them, where they were shipping them out of St. Louis, Missouri on Barges, Zapata Oil Transport Company barges down the Mississippi. They were coming out of Granite City Steel, Granite City, right outside.
Okay, when you say they, what are you talking about? Weapons, fighter jets?
These were the F-14 fighter jets, Apache helicopters, and M1 tanks were all shipped through there.
Okay, to Iraq, is that right?
Yes, they were shipped to Iraq. And they were shipped to also Iran, bought several of them. And I saw something very interesting remember Iraq and Iran had that war for 10 years and 1.5 million people died or whatever it was, 3 million. Well, when Daddy Bush attacked Iraq during the first Iraq war, I saw on the news that all of a sudden Iraq flew to Iran like 20 F-14 American-made fighter jets. And it was all over CNN, and then it was never covered anymore. And I said, well, they're with fighter jets. Later on, I had put 2 and 2 together on the documents that I have. Now, John Cole appears on Sybil Edmond if you remember Sybil Edmond, and it was about, pre-knowledge of 911. She was over 60
Yes.
days, Sybil Edmond, FBI. It's up on her whistleblower site. John Cole, USEAM, U.S. Counterintelligence, FBI. He was the one that was locked up with me in Springfield, Missouri, because he was trying to bust him for shipping the fighter jets. Now, he had given me those documents because there were other people that were locked up. And in those, it says, in that wanted for treason and sedition document, or link in the top of my breaking news site, this was someone else that was actually involved in the operations. And even Gunther Russbacher, it's now dead, was the first spook I ever came across, a reporter with the Rocky Mountain News, Steve Williamson, that had written books, Silverado. He had 8 of his stories were mine that I was given him 8 out of the 10 stories he put in the book.
You're talking about Gunther's book. Gunther is Raylan's ex-husband.
Yes, except they were only married a short period of time. I think she claims the fame a little bit more than she knew things. Okay? But Gunther, I even have under table of contents under CIA, third column over in alphabetical order under CIA. I've got a whole bunch of documents that Gunther had given me, including checks of national brokerage company showing this was a company that Millman, my ex-in-laws, were operating with. Meyer Blinder, the penny stock brokerage that went belly up in 91, and Hank Ringberg of AIG and all that, where they were committing Iran-Contra frauds, penny stock frauds through that company.
Okay.
That was national brokerage. That hooked to Gunther, and it hooked to a bunch of Iran-Contra security fraudsters, I called it. Even Al Martin admits in his book, The Conspirators, it's a very good book for an average person to read, to understand the kind of things that still go on today.
Okay, but okay, I appreciate that, but this is kind of we're getting too wide again, and we need to narrow it down a little bit. So we've got the bioweapons, and we've got them shipping to Iraq. We've got the link with PROMIS software and to the satellites. Do you understand what PROMIS is being used for beyond that? Because my understanding is that not only that PROMIS is a database also of humanity and the bloodlines, and that they are able to target certain populations with certain bioagents that will then, either eliminate them or weaken them or whatever, and that the PROMIS software is a sort of a profiling software. Have you heard this part of it?
No, I haven't, but I have heard that they are targeting bloodlines, and what's interesting, I've heard this from a lot of different spooks, I call them, alphabetical agency types in the know, real high up over the years, have told me that they've always been interested in certain bloodlines. They call them royal bloodlines, okay? People that are, over the generations, there's been, the Illuminati, they call it the Knights Templar bankers and so on and so forth. They target certain people. And I know one girl that the chapel over there in France, the castle over in France, that's been all over, I can't even think right now.
What you're talking about, Renly Chateau?
Yeah, I believe that's it. It's a certain family, though, that they've had all over the History Channel about the Knights Templars and so forth. It's a big history channel.
Right. But are you familiar? I mean, it doesn't sound like you're actually familiar with the bloodlines information.
Well, I know that in regards to being able to screw up their DNA and things like that, I've heard bits and pieces, Kerry, but I don't have the knowledge of that.
Okay, that's okay. So at this moment, we've been going for almost 2 hours straight, and or so. And I've got people asking questions, going crazy with questions in here. So I do want to be able to answer some of the questions. There is someone here who is also saying the PROMIS software ultimately became an artificial intelligence not only a database, but it became artificial intelligence. I don't know if Michael Riconosciuto was familiar with that or whether he had anything to do with that conversion. Do you know anything about that?
No, the knowledge I had, what Michael had talked to me in that 2 to 4 hour time frame that we had together, he did not know. And then, of course, Raymond Lavis later told me he had picked it up, and did what he did, turning it, making it, sound waves, light waves, turning it there, and hook it up to the loading boots and all that stuff. But as far as that, no, that's more technology that probably has been developed. I don't doubt that. They call it, most of this, they call it the alien technology. A lot of this, wild and crazy stuff. So I don't know about that part of it. I do know about the robotoids. We talked about that off the air, the mu metal element 115 and all that.
Okay, well, what about the robots that are being kept in underground bases? I'm told there's something like 15,000 in the U.S. underground.
DuPont got the contract and they used the alien technology, and this is where Ed Slade, my friend, former scientist, played into the role. They had developed, there's elements that go up, clear up to 140 something. And in the Bible code, they've even found it that it's 140 something. But man supposedly is only up to like 120 something that they're aware of developed. But element 115 is what they call mu metal. It's a living organism. That comes back to what you talked about these satellites. You were talking about nanotechnology satellites or whatever. It could be possible that could happen because the mu metal was developed all in the early 90s by DuPont. They built the robots. Ed worked on some of that mu metal stuff going way back where he infusioned it with radiation by zapping it with an array of radiation and making it into what they called the polling. Element 115 is called mu metal, moves around like, it's metal robot that moves around. Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he was a robot, his skin comes all off, that's what they look like, except they're able to grow a skin on the outside and look human. The U.S. built 1,200 of them back in the early to mid-90s. They use them in special forces to kill inside areas they can't get somebody. They're robots. And they have a computer brain inside the actual head. The only way you could, this is interesting because people should know this, the only way to stop one of those robots is you have to shoot it with an armor-piercing bullet right in the head to short-circuit the actual brain that it has in it. By infusing the element 115 top secret mu metal, it comes up to element 118, the polonium. Top secret. That's what they use in the flying saucers. That way they don't have to put a special shield underneath them or anything. That's what saucers are made of. But here's an interesting story that Ed told me after I gained his confidence over a few years, and I talked about the polonium and mu metal that I was aware of, and he thought in the beginning I was some infiltrator, and later on, a few years later, he told me the truth. This is what I tried to get him in those interviews that you can listen to under that link on the front page. That's Slade U.S. Scientist.
Okay.
He told me that he was ordered to infuse the mu metal, and he was ordered to do other things to it that he described that I'm a layman and I didn't understand the scientific side of it. And this was before his death when I was still in Vegas in 2002. And he confided me, and I was never to tell this until his death. I tried to get him on the radio, dude, he wouldn't. He said that when he was Area 51, he was told to take and do all this, and it was a chunk of metal that looked like the size of a loaf of bread. And this was sometime in the 70s or whatever it was. And he was late 70s in that time frame. He was told to take it down after he got through doing all these things to it at Papoose Lake, Nevada, where he worked, the alien base. He was told to take it down to a pyramid and meet so-and-so, a weird name, at, 6 o'clock in the evening. He was telling me the sun went down around 8 o'clock that night. It was in the summertime. And it was at a pyramid right outside of Mexico, that pyramid. And so he goes down there, he meets this guy. He says, Stu, He says there was just something about him. He said he stood 7 feet tall, and he says he looked a little weird as far as being a human. And I said, what do you think he was? He says, I think he was an alien. And he says, in the human form. He says, maybe a fallen angel is what he began to describe. He felt they were fallen angels rather than being aliens. And he said, he told me to take, he, introduced himself and shook hands. He says, now I want you to take that out. He says 40 to 60 yards, and he says, I want you to set it down. And so he said he had his bag. He goes out there and he pulls it out and sets the metal down, and he goes back over and he says, now what? He says, watch. And Ed said he turned around and looked. He says, all of a sudden it became a flying saucer. And he goes, oh, wow, it blew his mind. He says, what's this all about? How did you do that? He says, I thought it into a flying saucer. Watch this. He thinks back into that big chunk of metal the size of a loaf of bread and goes back to that. He says, now, Ed, you try it. He says, how do I do this? Just think it into a flying saucer. And he says, why, Ed told me the story, why he's standing there trying to think it into a flying saucer. He says, the guy's reading his mind. This being's reading his mind. He says, no, Ed, you're thinking wrong. You should be thinking this path instead of that path, and quit being so negative about it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it ended up turning into a flying saucer, and Ed said the guy was sitting there reading his mind during the whole period of time. Then he got a little joyride up into outer space and back, and that was one of our U.S. scientists. That comes into some of the nanotechnology that you may be describing as far as your friend Anthony Sanchez and the satellites that he's come across.
Okay, very interesting. So, all right, are you also aware that China has robots?
Yes. George Herbert Walker Bush sold the technology, high top secret technology, to the Chinese for $2.5 billion is what a U.S. intelligence agent told me. Who's willing to go for a grand jury, still living, wanting to do it, retired. But the point is, nobody's got a grand jury to put all this crap that I know and others know. But here's the deal. They sold it. Chinese started to build them all during the 90s. By 2000, they had 2 million of them already built. I asked in 2004, 2005 time frame, I got word they were shipped over here, many of them, and they were sitting in Costco containers and evergreen containers. I asked several people about it who were in the know. They said, yes, Stu. There's 200,000 of them that they have in Costco and Evergreen Airlines containers, these big shipping containers you see all across the U.S. They said, just look at the containers parked someplace that's oddball in some field or out behind some warehouse.
So you're saying a lot of the containers that people have been reporting, the containers aren't empty, is what you're saying?
They're not empty. They're full of robots, and the word is the Chinese can set them off, and the New World Order can set these robots off by a satellite, and one robot activates the rest, and then all of a sudden America's fighting 200,000 robots when they plan on opening up their martial law.
Well, that is also what Skynet, the capability of Skynet is to operate robots. Actually, it is just like in the movie, a centralized AI that then operates the nano satellites as well as robots.
Now, do you come across some other information that I've never known about? And as I've said before, Kerry, my library card expired a long time ago.
Okay, well, it seems like you're
metaphor, but trying to kill me 3 times, rolling me on a concrete barrier 3 times. That nearly did me, cracking my neck 5 times, bones off the back of my neck.
I hear you. All right. All right. So
you're bringing down a customer's house. It's been bizarre activity.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. At this moment, like I said, we've been going for a while. I think I'm going to allow these people to ask questions. I've got somebody who's been...
One thing before the questions start. I'll address them and do it fast. But
I'm sorry?
I said I just want to say one thing about
Go
this.
right ahead.
You understand. We've come to a point there's no return. The only way that we're going to do something to stop it, the American people are going to have to rise up and stop it. And there are enough people inside the intelligence world, good people, and enough people inside the military, good people, that will stand behind the American people and put a halt to this shit if everybody's willing to do it. I thought maybe, Occupy movement might do it. They're claiming here in the spring they're coming back. Hopefully they do come back. We need warriors out here. What we need is a massive a recall across this country of all these public officials. We need to be doing it now. People need to pick up the ball. Quit sitting around on your asses, throwing your crap up on the internet. Get involved. Create a national organization just to go after the recall. I mean, I heard about a little Kansas town recalling their, here on the local news here last week on KCTV5, recalling their mayor and recalling a couple of their council members. They recalled the governor in Wisconsin. Hook up with these people. Find out how they did it. Find out from an attorney. Get your buddies together. This is what Occupy ought to be doing. Instead of going out there and, doing what they're doing, they need to start addressing this kind of stuff. We will never have, and it doesn't make a friggin' bit of difference on these elections as long as they're controlling with satellites and on the ground and chips and electronic.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. Oh, folks, we're going to change things next election when we get our Republicans in. Oh, we're going to change things when we get our Democrats in. How many years have we heard this, Kerry? 30 friggin' years we've heard this, and there's no change. And we went from 1% controlling 20% of the GDP, the economy of the United States. Now this 1% is growing to 5%, cabal of billionaires and trillionaires at the 1%, and now they're in control of 90+% of the U.S. economy. Mom and pops aren't around. We've got to take the situation under control, get rid of these corrupt public officials. There's only 3 or 4 congressmen or senators that I know of, Ron Paul and his son being the 2 of the few. They just got rid of Dennis Kucinich by changing out overnight he lost his job because redistricting.
Really? Interesting.
Dennis Kucinich, redistricting.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to have to stop you here. And Stu, I'm sorry. You know, that's great. I appreciate that. But at this moment, I have to move on and ask you some questions that are coming in the chat. These people have been very patient, sitting here for 2 hours. You've been giving them a great amount of bang for their buck, so to speak. And actually, let me address that right here. This is being done for free by donation only. Donations are requested and not required. That's because we want to be sensitive to the people that can't afford to donate anything. But I want to say right here and now that Project Camelot cannot continue to do these kinds of live streams. I cannot continue to do my work if we don't have an income. My webmaster is here. He's trying to move our sites over to a new database and a new site. We have some people that are standing by trying to help Camelot. I can't pay these people. I can't pay anyone right now. I can't even pay myself unless we get a donation from people. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that Stew Webb has a website. He's obviously doing a tremendous amount of work here. He's here for free, spending his time trying to educate people to what's going on. So please do donate as a way of thanking. You know, it doesn't matter how much you donate. It's just a matter of trying to help out. If you can, we would both appreciate it. And then, of course, if there's other people you want to support, please be my guest. Okay, so I'm going to...
Real quick, Kerry, you know, for 4 months, I haven't been able to physically go do any work because of these 3 car crashes. These past 2, Iran-Contra boy got me. I've got a screwed up back. I've got a broken vertebra in my neck still to this day. I've got doctors telling me, don't go swing a hammer and go do your construction work. So, you know, I build stuff. I can't do it right now. And I got insurance companies that won't even pay for my total vehicle that's sitting in my driveway. It's the most bizarre thing. I got 2 attorneys that have both been threatened now. 2 of them threatened after I go visit them. FBI is following me around, DHS, whoever. I could use donations. I know you can, Gary. I mean, you're doing a wonderful job. You've had some great people on here. I know several of your guests that have been on here.
Thank you very much.
I personally have known them over the years. They're all friends. We've got to continue this kind of information flow, all of us.
Yes,
right now.
Absolutely.
I see people donating to various causes and to food for Africa and this and that. Well, that's fabulous to humanity. But right now, we're the leader in this country as far as the United States of America always has been. We got to get this information out to the American people so they cure the problem in this country, so our country doesn't go down and New World Order totally takes over. We've got to get out of the situation that we're in. But anyway, I've said enough.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I've got a question here. Was Ed Doc Slade murdered for working on a secret project in North Carolina?
No, he was not. He was retired, and he wasn't.
Okay. Have you heard the term time pirates?
No, but I know about space-time, if that's what they're talking about, and all the other stuff. Where they're able to do it with the odd meter. I suggest anybody go get the Montauk series project books, Black Sun. It's in all those books about the odd meter, space-time, and I've known people that have gone through it, including Barbara Hartwell. Look her up on the internet.
Okay, when you say you know people that have gone through space-time, what are you talking about? Going through portals, time travel?
They put on in booths in a series of books called the Montauk series.
Yeah, well, I've read most of them, but what do you...
Well, they put an OG meter on them, and then they set it, turn it on, and they set it for the year that they want to go into or used to. And it had 5 sides. I've seen one and actually touched the thing. Someone in Las Vegas had one that worked at Area 51 was able to get it out of there. It's called an OG meter, odd meter. It's super top secret. And then they've got, like on Montauk, they had a pyramid style with wired up and antenna. It was set up and all that. It's to deal with that. It's to be able to do into the portal into space-time. Well, Nikola Tesla, our scientists that originally worked on free energy, space-time, and anti-gravity. Once he cranked up those 2 magnetic disks together, at a certain high speed, all of a sudden it became a black hole in front of another dimension and so forth. That's space-time. Barbara Hartwell was part of that project at one time. She'd gone into space-time. Look her up on the internet.
Okay, did you meet her?
Barbara, she's a friend. I've known her for years.
Okay, well, sounds like somebody I'd like to interview, Stu.
You could probably do that, and you might go in and look underneath this Bush Nazi Goon News that's hooked into the center lane that I hooked in for tonight's show which is Project Camelot, etc. Look at Bush Nazi Goon. She wrote a tremendous amount of articles about them attacking me and attacking her. How the Gunderson crowd, Division Number 5, FBI, the infiltrators were attacking us, trying to disgrace us, demonize us, slander us, etc.
Okay, and her name is Barbara
Hartwell. I think she has a blog spot, Barbara Hartwell. I could probably reach out to her. You could interview her.
Okay, great. Next question we've got here is, do you know about Paul Neary, NSA, or Colonel Nick Rowe, U.S. Air Force, or Colonel Ed Cutolo?
Yeah, go into my internet site, table of contents, 3rd column over, scroll down for the Cutolo affidavit, under C, Cutolo affidavit, and read those 2 affidavits. Bill McCoy gave me that affidavit. That was the short version. It had an ear in it. It had Colonel Cutolo and all that. That ties to Private Tyree, his client at the time, who was arrested for supposing murdering his wife. He didn't. And that was part of all the, that was tied into the blocking of U.S. satellites and other things tied into taking over the drug cartel eventually in Colombia and going in and raiding them. And it's in the Cutolo affidavit and using these people to assassinate various ones. And later, Colonel Cutolo was killed and all of them. But Private Tyree was jailed. His attorney sued him. It's under FEMA. They created FEMA from this. It ties into the Cutolo affidavit, which was given to me to release in 1994, which I did when I was doing speeches all across the nation. I nearly got killed. They sent a team after me, and I was warned. And sure enough, the couple was exactly what Bill McCoy told me, because I called him that night. He says, "You got a team on you, be looking." I said, "I saw them already. They're in the parking lot." He says, "Well, they're going to try to do you." Cutolo, I released it. They put it in several books around. It's floated off. It's very important. This is more treason and sedition by Daddy Bush and his gang.
Okay, all right.
We call it the Iran-Contra frauds, alive and well, as Al Martin says.
Okay, let's see. Frank Connick Jr., he wrote an enhanced part of the PROMIS software?
I don't know him. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, yeah. Frank Comnick Jr. I'm not sure. I don't think I've heard that name.
No,
I thought actually a woman was involved with enhancing the PROMIS software as well. Stephen Greer says uncle designed the lunar landing. Was his uncle Slade?
Ed Slade had designed it in 90 days. The government told him that they had built it and completed it because he had designed it. He was a U.S. scientist. And then later he finds out that they did not use it because he says something's wrong. Suppose your jets landed, as they're coming down and all this. And Ed said he says, there's nothing blowing off the moon. He says, I knew something was wrong. And he says later, he said this, they credited me for it and all. And he says, I figured out they used anti-gravity on it.
Okay, so the answer basically is the answer is no, though. Slade was not related to Greer.
No, not that I'm. Ed never talked about anybody named Greer. No.
Okay. Sherry Seymour talked about esoteric weapons being created on the Indian reservation. Can you describe them? No,
I don't know anything about that. I
well,
just know about the rifle, the bullet, and different stuff, and of course the Law connection and all that. But no.
Okay, but yeah, I think some of what she may also be referring to are the bioweapons, may I say? But esoteric weapons.
They were doing some types of bioweapons. I know that Gunderson got his hands on some of those that caused whatever it was he put on Jackie McCauley, who had the McBart preschool case, and suddenly Gunderson appears and he's trying to infiltrate her and be her big brother type. I'm going to help you. And all he was there was to find out what she knew and then to try to murder her. And she said he put a bioweapon of some type on, she lives in California out there by the beach, and had a home for years there. And apparently they heat the homes with water through those old radiators. She had an older home, that stand up above, the floor there, just a little water heating type device. And she said that, that's how she got contaminated. She found out later some bioweapon that's given her fibromyalgia, or whatever they pronounce it as. That she still doesn't have a cure for. She's been to doctors. She's, going.
Okay, but you're saying she's accusing Gunderson of having. I mean, how does she know where the bioweapon came from?
Because of various people. Rakana Shuttle being one talked about that she was in. Michael kind of took to her, as I recall. I'll tell you to get the exact story because I don't want to say anything that. My memory of all the details of how it went down and everything, I don't remember. And so I'll hook you up with Jackie and you can maybe do an interview because it's significant because she was being infiltrated at the time by all these Kapasan Indian reservation boys. And I think that you need to talk to her, Kerry.
Okay. All right. I've got some other questions here. I'm being told I'm louder than Stu. Turn my voice, my sound down. Actually, I can't turn my sound down without turning Stu's sound down because the picture you're getting is coming out of my computer. So it's I'm operating the live stream. So I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what to do other than maybe talk later.
Speak up.
Okay. Let's see. Can the technology harness consciousness and energy from the awakening critical mass and channel it for negative purposes?
I guess they could. I know that. I guess they could channel it, but I'm a firm believer in God and Christ, and I'm a firm believer in prayer. And I think if enough people really started praying really hard for God to destroy this evil and to out them, I think that it could be done. All it takes is, one man here on the planet, a righteous one, to do this, and I think there wouldn't be any problem. I don't claim to be perfectly righteous, I try to live the best life I can, live by the Ten Commandments. I pray one heck of a lot, and I see a lot of things happening. I'm still breathing after 30 attempts, so...
Okay, let's see. What is the most shocking thing that Ed Slade told you?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's probably take an hour, but I suggest people go into the interviews. I tried to get him to talk, and he says, "I'm under the CIA secrecy agreement, and so on and so forth." But Stu, you know what? You tell him. And then he said, "I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement." That's how he acknowledged that it's all true. So listen.
Okay, well, we'll definitely go listen to that. By the way, the person who's asking over and over again whether Michael Riconosciuto had a backdoor to the PROMIS software, he created the backdoor. He didn't have it. He created it.
No, he created the backdoor, and where Raymond Lavas picked up was Ray took it, made it to where he created light and radio waves and turned them in midair. That's what his technology ended up changing.
Okay, someone wants to know why Iraq flew the fighter jets to Iran.
To keep from destroying the fighter jets.
Say that I'm not sure I understand.
Right.
So they wouldn't be bombed, or
during Gulf War I, we were bombing them, and when that happened, they got the fighter jets over into Iran to protect the fighter jets, and those were the stolen fighter jets from U.S. Arsenal that Daddy Bush sold. It's in those documents under wanted for treason and sedition at the top of my news page.
Okay, do you still work with Tom Heneghan and Operation Overlord at Yorktown?
Operation Overlord at Yorktown? We call it Operation Overlord at Yorktown, yeah. But I work with Tom all the time, man. We put postings out together. Tom puts his name on them. He writes them. He's a good writer. We work together a lot. Tom's been around for a long time as a whistleblower, kind of behind the scenes. Yes.
Okay.
Him and Reagan-Wanta have been good friends. I think that says a lot.
Okay. Someone is asking if there's a link up between Burning Man and let me see something. If they can capture that question, I just lost it. I got somebody here who's helping me capture questions, which is thank you very much for doing that. But if you can try to grab that question, I was only able to the Burning Man festival in Indio. Is there a psyops attached to the reservation that Burning Man is taking place at? Do you know anything about that?
I've heard of the Burning Man thing. Those are done with some of the rituals and stuff, but I don't know.
Okay, someone's just asking if you're friends with Leo-Wanta. You just said you were friends with Leo-Wanta.
Yes.
So.
Oh, I've known Leo since, when I brought Chip Tatum forward. Al Martin says, "Stu, we got a guy in our group we want to take public, Gene Tatum." I said, okay. Chip Tatum came forward with me, did probably, I don't know, there was probably 200 radio shows we did together. That was to get him into the community, the community, and accepted in because he was a clean, good guy. He turned against North. I've got a lot of the old tapes. But the deal is Leo, at the time, Bill McCoy had hooked up with Chip Tatum and was getting his information tied to one of the money laundering attorneys, Kennedy, out of New York on the 6CI Council. And Leo had been around at the time and in dungeon and the whole bit. Bill had come across Leo, and we were all kind of, I never really worked directly with Leo back at that time, should we say. But I was aware of him and his activity, and then later on, came to know him in the 2000 time frame with Tom Heneghan. So Leo's been around. Actually, I've been doing this for 28.5 years over my daughter, and to try to initially have a relationship with her by exposing and breaking ground on the money, and I never knew how big this guy was, but. I don't have a relationship with an illegal lifetime restraining order. But Leo-Wanta has been at it exactly the same amount of time I have. 28.5 years. He's been working his operation, which was originally to break the Russian ruble, and then his operation was to break the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is not broken.
Okay, let's see. People are asking if you know Benjamin Fulford.
No, I don't.
Okay. And hold on one second. I'm going to see if some of these questions, I have to say, someone wants to know if the arrested politicians and banksters will be housed in the FEMA concentration camps.
I think it'd be a great idea. I think we ought to citizens arrest. Like to do it and bring the charges against them. It'd be an excellent location to park all these criminals.
Okay.
I could suggest one right here at Richard Bauer Air Force Base in Kansas City, where the FEMA camp is. Maybe we could park them there, or I could have a few talks with a few of them.
Okay. Do you happen to know about the bankers that are sort of disappearing? They seem to be abandoning their houses, taking their families with them, where they might be going.
I haven't heard anything about that, but I was contacted today by Chris at Scott Freedom Fighters for America Radio, and he had contacted me and sent me a list that's apparently out there of all these bankers that have resigned since last September, and from various banks throughout the world. I don't know how accurate this list is. I glanced at it just for a moment before the show this evening and was going through it. And apparently there's a lot of them that, if it's true, that they've all resigned in the month of February and into March. A hell of a lot of them resigned yesterday, which is kind of ironic. And then, you look at today's stress test. I released the names of the bundlers last night around 11 o'clock. I see the market really getting funny and shaky today, and they delayed the stress test suddenly on the banks after I release this and publish it all over the New York Stock Exchange links and all kinds of places. Suddenly, all of a sudden, they delayed the stress test report for several hours today. And then they come up with 4 banks, including KeyBank, that's owned by the Mizell Group that bundled up the mortgages. Suddenly, they don't meet the stress test. I don't know what's going on, Kerry.
Okay, well, actually, I have a question for you. Alex Collier, I don't know if you know who Alex Collier is.
I've heard the name.
Okay. Well, he recently did an interview, and he said that a lot of these sort of takedowns of sort of top leaders, resignations, etc., that a lot of it is actually almost staged. In other words, they are taking down the powers that be are doing a takedown of their sort of lower middle level managers but they're actually it's pretending to be a lot weaker than they actually are. Have you heard anything in that regard?
No, I haven't, but I'm familiar with this. I'm familiar with the fact that Interpol is involved. Good people with Interpol are involved, and if you look at the stock market 1 year ago, it was trading about the same level all the way across the board as what it's doing today. They've kept them at bay for roughly a year, and if you look at the International Monetary Fund, the head of that, Christine Lagarde, she's a former French prime minister, and good gal, I'm aware of. She's not letting them get away with anything. So, we can leave it at that. There's a lot of things happening.
Okay. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Have you heard of the White Dragon Society?
I've heard of it, but never really looked at it.
Okay, what about the chemtrails? Have you done an investigation in that area?
Yeah, the chemtrails, I know all about it. It's there's 3 operations. It's up on my internet site under table contents under chemtrails. It names all the 3 operations. One of them's Cloverleaf, and the other 2, and what they've been doing is they've been testing on the American people biological weapons and various mainly various kinds of flus and other things, should we say, to determine how they can get people sick. And they do it before elections and things of that nature, or make you feel euphoric or whatever. And they even do it to the water in some communities and big communities. But the chemtrails, they're spraying the hell out of us. And it's just like Kansas City. They sprayed this place with flu. And I actually got sick from it myself for nearly a week and a half in the month of February. And I never had a flu bug go up my spine the way that this did. Every bone that's moved out of my spine, I have several spots that just won't stay right now. And I have to do the chiropractor. I felt it all the way through my spine and into the areas that are still broken in my neck from these 3 crashes that they've done to me over the past year. And so I'm familiar with the spraying, and this is the test on the American people. Now, I saw something a while back in where China actually shot down a CIA aircraft. I think it was 2 months ago that was spraying chemtrails over them, and they found out they had sprayed the bird flu. And that's what I'm hearing that they had sprayed over America about 6 weeks ago, was the bird flu contaminated everybody here. But I've seen the craft. Anybody who looks up in the sky, let's face it, look up in the sky, you see a trail. If it's a contrail, it dissipates behind the airplane. That means the airplane's going along, here's a contrail, hit the side, it's disappearing behind it. They're hitting moisture off their wings. When it's a chemtrail, they leave a big streak. It looks like a cloud. Suddenly it starts widening and coming eventually down. And I've seen, just like city after city, several of them that I've lived in, from having to move over the years to hide out, should we say, I've seen it repeatedly when they've sprayed it. It goes on. It's Operation Cloverleaf. It should be shut down. If you go back, if they've been doing this since the 1960s, if you go back in on my website, you'll see under AIDS, table of contents, third column over, alphabetical. Click on that link. That same document that I've got, I had talked to Bill Cooper one time and told him I had the documents, and same one that he got his hand on, which was congressional, that he put in his book, Pale Horse, before they killed him. It's the same document in there that shows it in 79, 69, they got the research money. In 72, they created AIDS, the U.S. government did. And even Gunther Russbacher had told me back in 1992 or 1994, whichever it was, by phone, that they had put AIDS in the vaccination worldwide, and that we would see, it was part of Project 2000 to depopulate the Earth by the year 2000 for the New World Order, to bring us down by 40%. And that they had put it in the vaccinations for kids throughout the world under the World Health Organization. In these vaccination shots that they had, they've got the AIDS virus. And he said they're targeting the black people because they want an all-white Aryan nation race, the New World Order does. They don't want any blacks, Hispanics, or Asians. And that's the reason the African countries are getting, and the blacks are getting it very heavy. So I'm aware of the AIDS side, I'm aware of the chemtrails, and I think on the chemtrails, the best place to go that I am aware of is Dr. Heneghan has the best information.
Yes, Clifford Carnicom. Okay, there is several questions coming through here, but what I'm going to try to do is wind this down a bit. Someone wants to know if you know Bill Deagle.
Is he the minister?
No, Dr. Bill Deagle. He was a doctor assigned to patients in a black underground base at a certain point. I've heard. He has a radio show.
Okay, I've heard the name Bill Deagle before. It may be because he's got a radio show. I don't know. I may have seen him in a speech in Las Vegas. I've done a lot of speeches around the country, and I may have seen him out there at some point.
Okay. I wanted to ask you before I forget, you talked about Beyond a Pale Horse, Bill Cooper, and I was wondering, so you knew him?
I knew him. We had many discussions before his death.
Okay. Do you happen to know if he, John Lear says he was kind of losing it towards the end. Do you think he was losing it? Was that authentic or what was going on?
Well, I know John too. I've been in his home Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and things of that nature. I know John well. I don't know. I think they were targeting him so heavy, and he knew it, and they were probably using a lot of the stuff, the technology they're using on us now, like E-Systems uses the West Star satellite system with what they call sonar technology, and they've got tens of thousands of people they shoot in a 2-hour period of time. They flies over us, and they shoot you, and it zaps the magnesium, potassium out of your body, gives you cramps, and eventually a heart attack. I believe they were using weapons like that on him because he was very outspoken about all the alien connection. And he actually went in the night he was killed, or I had heard about it. I went and extracted his entire website, downloaded his entire site to see if he had anything that he had, never shared with me or that I didn't have. And there wasn't anything there except for the fact that he had gone on some radio shows out in Utah. and started really blasting about the Papoose Lake Area 51 connection and the alien stuff, and they don't want that discussed. And, like Ed Slate said, they don't want you to know about the 1954 to 2012 alien agreement. And, the day I called Ed that he was buried, I called him to ask, when's that end of that date of that agreement? I want to know, when in 2012 does the alien agreement end? It'd be kind of interesting.
Okay, did you get an answer?
Oh, I got an answer from his brother. Had a cell phone that they just buried him, and I didn't even know they had killed him and buried him. I hadn't talked to him.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, what do you know the contents of the agreement?
The agreement was, as Ed described on the radio in that series of recorded that's on my site, and others had told me about, that the agreement was that Roswell made the first connection with the humans, us. And it was for the purpose of, aliens been around a long time, which Ed said, that he believes they were the fallen angels. And other people have referred that have worked at Area 51 believes they were fallen angels. But that agreement, they go into the White House, make this agreement, you give us underground bases, Area 51, now it's out in Richfield, Utah. They have a big one right there in that, just to the northeast. In the mountain range there in that big park.
Well, near Dugway as well, right?
Yes, and they've got them in Australia. They have them in behind Denver, Colorado, in the Argo Tunnel, the largest hole in the center of the Earth. And a lot of this stuff deals with, the center of the Earth being hollow, Admiral Byrd, the hollow Earth. Right now, the Aurora Borealis, they call it the Northern Lights. This is from the sun that the U.S. Air Force described when they flew on Operation Blue Book, chasing flying saucers in 1952, that they had seen, a sun in the middle and a big river. It looked like paradise, like the Garden of Eden down there, and the whole bit. And it's huge. The Earth is hollow. And Admiral Byrd said he chased the Nazis. A whole fleet of his ships got lost. 2,000 men in a firefight chasing Nazis and their flying saucers with gunships on them. The reason he lost so many men. He chased them into the South Pole. Today they claim they have holograms over it where people can't see. But that agreement with the aliens, so-called agreement, was that they could snatch, that they told Eisenhower when they went to the White House to meet with him, and they signed it in 54, that they told him that they wanted to snatch 1 million people for biological purposes off the face of the planet and to use them for various experiments. And he's like, screw you. You aren't going to do that. Well, if you don't, we'll just, as Ed Slate said, we'll just eat you. He says, F you. And apparently one of his staff members started getting eaten on, and they didn't like that. Well, this is the deal with evil stuff, and it's the deal with, as Ed said, fallen angels. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But this is a reason that I've met several girls that have been snatched at an Area 51 convention that they put on at the little alien restaurant. Joe and his wife own it. People I know. I've spoke out there with Jordan Maxwell. That I believe you've had him up there on your interviews. I spoke out there. He gave me a couple hours of his 4-hour slot one night because I showed up out there mysteriously with someone, and he was in agreement that they're fallen angels. And
Nephilim is what you mean.
Well, yeah. Fallen angels, there's a difference. They mate with humans in Genesis 6. It says in the Bible, and mate with humans, and they become Nephilim bloodline. But the fallen angels have been around since God cast them out of heaven when there was that big war in heaven, and they're down here on earth. Well, where are they at on earth? Are they invisible? Are they roaming the planet? Can they occupy human beings? I've been told that the 100 Templar Illuminati bankers are all occupied by quote-unquote aliens/fallen angels. So, Kerry, take your imagination where you want to, but these things are real.
Oh, absolutely.
The 54 agreement was, we give you invisibility, and eventually we'll give you other things. In exchange, we get these bases, and we get so many humans a year, and you can't do anything about it, or we'll just destroy you and your planet, supposedly. Now, they gave them that. But I find what's interesting interesting also is I think they were around a long time before this, because if you go back, why would Office of Naval Intelligence own Area 51 inside of a base, inside inland, outside of Las Vegas, this huge tract of land? Look at the history of that place. Naval Intelligence has owned the place and all that land all those years. What did they find out there? A hole into the center of the earth that they didn't want everybody else knowing about?
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I've got somebody asking, I think you've answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What happened to Chip Tatum, last interviewed by Ted Gunderson?
Well, Ted Gunderson infiltrated him down at a global science meeting, of which I arranged the meeting. He was doing a lot of radio. Tatum had done a series of stories with Michael Rupert. He had arranged that with Gary Webb, while I was working Maxine Waters, the congresswoman, to, bring congressional hearings, and he was going to burn them all. Well, what ended up happening to Tatum was that Maxine Waters caved on us, the little bitch, pardon the expression, this congresswoman, you bitch, you caved on us. We could have had him there, but you caved on us. Well, how did she cave? Daddy Bush sent the boys to have a little talk with her and says, we'll work a deal with you. If you're caught with crack cocaine, you get 10 years. If you're caught with cocaine, you get 5 years. They called it the black man's problem. Apparently, crack cocaine is watered down with all kinds of other crap, and it isn't pure cocaine. So we'll make the law equal. And as a result, you don't touch the Tatum deal. She caved. As usual, congressmen and senators cave for various reasons. Now, to answer your question pertaining to Eugene Chip Tatum, he had his face ripped off on the beach. His body was found and his face was ripped off, and he was dead on a Nicaragua beach before, I believe it was, the 2000 election. And it was to send a message, as Al Martin said, to all the other spooks to keep their damn mouths shut about, I think it was 2000, about Daddy Bush. But what happened to him after she caved in, it was shortly thereafter Daddy Bush shows up with $5 million in a briefcase, or a suitcase, is what I heard, a Samsonite, Millman's company. They show up with $5 million, and a few armed people point guns at him, and either you shut your mouth and leave, or you and your wife are going to die right here and there. So he had no choice. He did his deal, and he tried to save the country and tried to do what he could do, but it comes to a certain point that certain things happen, and that's what happened. A lot of spooks I've seen over the years take their money and leave.
Okay. Wow. So we agreed. I would like to wrap this up because we're going a while.
I want to add one real quick.
Okay, yeah.
He took his money. He was still very patriotic because he bought a network. And there was a preacher, and I forgot the guy's name, Jim somebody. He had a nationwide show, and he was on shortwave and worldwide Christian radio, and he was on the internet, and he was hooked up to, I think 100 stations nationwide. And Tatum made a donation of $100,000 to that network. I got a call from him and said that Tatum had made a donation and that he wanted you to have a year worth of free show. Well, I've been broke for years. I mean, barely scraping by. I couldn't afford, before we had, long distance flat rate and all that, I couldn't afford the calls to the network even do the shows. So I, passed on that. But Tatum tried to help, and I believe that's one of the reasons Daddy Bush went against him, because he had probably found out about that, and that's the reason his face was actually ripped off and his body laying on the beach in Nicaragua.
Okay. We agreed that we were going to talk about the earth changes. So let's go there before we close this down, if you don't mind. I'd like you to share what it is you know about the earth changes, and let's kind of go down that road.
Okay. I have come aware through other ones. Chris, with his Freedom Fighter for American Radio, has been telling me for months to check out Dutch Sense, DUTCHSINCE. He does a preview every day. I think it's a good site for people to go to of what's going on.
Yes, I've interviewed him, by the way.
I've seen, he's putting out a great video of earthquakes and volcano activity, but here's what's going on. And it's, I saw his for the first time the other day and saw that, the New Madrid fault spewing from a dormant volcano down there. And it's also a couple in Arkansas and also in Oklahoma, I think it was. But I also am aware that there's massive earthquakes worldwide. We got the Aurora Borealis. They're saying we can see down in the Midwest and all over the United States in the next few days. They're blaming that on the supposedly massive flare, sun flare, solar flare off the sun that has opened that up. I don't believe that's the case. What I've been told is the reason that we're seeing that is because of the HAARP moving the jet stream through this new technology that I reported on, and later Jesse Ventura had done in one of his specials on True TV, and it has created a hole inside the electromagnetic field of about a fourth of the planet. So this is the reason we're seeing like laser lights from that sun being in the earth coming up out of there. And Alaska TV stations reported on it this in the past few days. I hooked up a link on my Facebook link about it. Someone had shared it with everybody up on Twitter or something. I put it over on Facebook. It shows Alaska TV. But we've got those kind of things. We've got the radioactivity from that Japanese earthquake, all washing up, the debris washing up on the West Coast for the past month and a half. And we've got contamination going on worldwide. Besides the Gulf of Mexico, the debris on the Examiner, she's been reporting it's still spewing out, but they've never fixed it. When they sprayed that place so they could bring their two skimmers in, suck up all that oil, they sprayed it with that Cortex or whatever they call it. It's got cyanide, arsenic in it. Any of the fish down there in the Gulf. I'm not even eating fish anymore. I love fish and used to even eat tuna out of a can. I won't touch any of it now because you're probably going to die and get poisoned. She's been reporting, I don't know how many, look her up, Deborah Dupree, D-U-P-R-E, theexaminer.com. She's done tremendous stories on human rights. She's tied up with Robert Redford. She's a personal friend of his and so forth. And he supports a lot of human rights causes. And she's done tremendous stuff on the amount of miscarriages women are having that are eating fish from the Gulf, live along the Gulf, and so forth. But there's deadly gases in there. Where all that huge amount of fine came out of there, that oil, and they skimmed it up, they left a third in this sulfate, hydrogen sulfate, and this other gas that will come up out of there and kill millions of people. I believe that that's one of the reasons for the dead bird spots here and there around the world that's popping up out of there in bubbles. And I have an oil expert who's told me that. He said that's the reason, when they suck it up out of the ground, or out of the ocean, they've got a stack burning off those two deadly gases consistently. What's interesting is about 14 years ago or 12 years ago down in Nepal, around oil wells, they had a lake. A small pond lake, a big bubble popped up out of it, rolled downhill, kind of bouncing along, floating invisible gas. They determined it was this hydrogen sulfide, the deadly gases, the two of them, that were killing everything. Snakes, rats, cats, dogs, humans, everything. But some people that were on a bus, one of these old buses where they sit up on top, it's got a little rail around it, they survived because the bubble was low enough that they didn't get hit with it. And it rolled for like 20 some odd miles and killed everything in its path. We have 1/3 of what was spilled out there in the Gulf is oil. And we have all that huge cavern now that runs up the base of the Mississippi. That Mississippi is going to split when that cavern opens up from that New Madrid fault. That's a huge earthquake getting ready to happen and will happen at some point. That's going to split the Mississippi, in my opinion, and other people's opinions, right up to Chicago, Illinois, and the Great Lakes. That means, like in Kansas City, I'm on the western side here, not down near St. Louis. We might be seeing beachfront property pretty close to us over here in Missouri in the Kansas City area. And when we have a big earthquake, and I expect that we're probably going to have some really massive things happening. Now, there's another thing going on. The planetary alignment that everybody had thought, or they talk about doomsday, December the 22nd, which is the winter solstice of 2012. It's all the Mayan calendar and all this other.
Sure.
A friend of mine that's high up in an agency had told me that the Super Collider over in Switzerland, that they were able to look into it, seeing the galaxies they've never seen through space-time and so forth, that on December the 22nd, 2012, we would line up into a big cross of all of our planets. I saw the other day, someone's already reporting on this, that we're already lining up, and I haven't had time to put all this information up on my site, that we've already begun the alignment. Now, I saw about a week and a half ago, I don't even watch mainstream press really at all, just to pick up a few things once in a while in the morning or whatever, and the evening to see what's happened, because it's all propaganda crap.
Well,
but I remember seeing Jackie Jarrett on CNN, the weather girl, saying, something's happened, folks. We've had a moonquake. Look at this big crater along the side of the moon. They're reporting it's a moonquake. That's, I believe, from the gravitation going on of all these planets lining up. And as they line up, we're going to have shaking of this planet. We're having birth pains that are big-time birth pains that are going on right now, and we're going to have some heavy-duty stuff go on.
okay.
And if they go start a war, we're in trouble. We're all in trouble. We've got to,
Absolutely.
you know,
Well, yeah, the last thing we need is a war on top of all of that, but that's exactly what they're planning, of course, because they want to actually, they're going to create an Armageddon, whether it would happen naturally or not. Okay.
Well, I don't understand it. There's only 100 of them and 10,000 of them at the very top working underneath them and control all these corporations now worldwide. Why can't we just do a mass citizens arrest? We've got, what, how many billions on a friggin' planet? I'm ready to go. Don't start the revolution without me. You know?
Yes, and I appreciate that. Me either, for that matter. Okay, so
Put it inside the Capitol and put a fence around it and armed guards at the doors and start trying them one by one, and that would be a good thing.
All right. All right. Someone is asking about ties to Project Ibis and James Casbolt. Do you know about that? Or
I don't know who that is or anything
yeah,
about
I figured. Okay. That's all good. What about the San Andreas? And what I would say is, are you aware of Yellowstone and the supervolcano?
Oh, yeah, I'm aware of that super volcano, and I mean, anybody go right up on the government site, the geological site. I mean, it's been going on for 7 or 8 years, since about 2004, I think. The bottom of it's come up 90 feet the last time I heard, or 100 feet up. It's been killing fish for several years, 4 or 5 years. From the heat, it's got to almost a boiling point, and it is going to blast. I mean, the USGS site says it's going to be a massive, active, quote-unquote, volcano that's going to come spilling up out of there soon. And they're saying that it could hit for 650 kilometers, roughly, 700 miles or 750 miles in diameter, is going to be buried with about 20 feet of ash. So if that thing goes off, folks, if you're up in Colorado, hang it up, go south. Same thing, it's going to hit up to, a few feet over here in the Missouri. People are going to be buried in their houses. I might add to that because, my memory, I'm kind of getting a little bit older, a little more gray from all the stress and everything. And my library card expired. I can't remember everything. But that's where they get the metal, the mu metal, the metal that becomes mu metal that becomes dipolonium. It comes from these volcanoes, the deep wells within that are spewing out the water like Yellowstone. And you've got government agents going up there every night when the park closes, and they got some kind of device that sucks that up like a big metal device, and that's what they're using for a lot of these special black ops projects. So anybody who wants to stake out Yellowstone National Park is something I just remembered that was told to me years ago.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I have to say that I do have sulfur in my water here. I am inland about 14 miles from the west coast, and I've been having sulfur in the water here for the first time in quite a while, now going on at least the last couple months. So that's a sure sign that there's heating up, besides the fact that Dutch Sense has reported on the ground, the steam coming out of the ground, also in Santa Barbara and also around the 29 Palms area.
That's interesting. You know, one other thing I saw on the Weather Channel has really been reporting a lot of very unusual things. Also, you might check it out. Weather.com has been keeping up on this. But you know, Hawaii had massive amounts of torrential rains here about a week ago, and the other day over the weekend they had pea-sized hail for the first time ever. So that was kind of interesting. Hawaii, pea-sized hail.
Yeah.
But this just comes from HARP and moving the jet stream. You know, we need to take joysticks and the toys away from these New World Order pigs. We need to be doing recall, and if that doesn't work, we need to be doing arresting. And we need to throw away the voting booth idea and all the propaganda that comes on all these mainstream media stations. And we need to take Fox News, and that place needs to be emptied out, because it is nothing but Israeli Mossad propaganda, George Bush, New World Order propaganda. And if you look at the links on the bank bailout scamster, Millman and Mizell, they were the ones that financed old Rupert Murdoch, Greenberg, Fox News. What's interesting is those satellites they put up, those Skynet satellites, I believe they call them, is that China shot them up. Well, U.S. didn't have any control over that. And what were aboard those satellites? I understand they got death ray on those satellites. And if that's true, that means Fox News go around just zapping anybody they want to zap. That needs to be looked at. And that whole espionage shit needs to be shut down that's going on here in America.
Absolutely.
And that propagandists, that Bill O'Reilly and Lutherhead Sean Hannity, you know, they need to be taken to the outhouse, you know?
Okay, Stu, thank you very much. I appreciate that. At this moment, I'm gonna close this down. We've tried to answer all the questions that made sense that came in the chat. Somebody wants to know about the Imperial Palace in Las Vegas. Do you have something to say about that?
Well, no.
Okay.
No. I mean,
All right.
other than water coming in the back end from the artery that comes out of the North Pole, there's a natural spring that comes down the Charleston, or the mountain up there off of Charleston, and it comes down. There's a natural spring and a cavern that goes underneath Las Vegas, which, you know, if we have a big earthquake, Las Vegas is history. If you go to the pyramid out there, or not the pyramid, but the one built right next door to it, I forgot that they had built.
You mean the Luxor?
The Luxor, which is the pyramid, yeah. Next door, they built that new hotel when I was out there, and it's built on a cavern, and it was actually sinking, and it's been on the Discovery Channel that they had to put it on stilts. It's on hydraulic stilts holding that hotel up.
Well, apparently there's a submarine channel going in somewhere in there as well.
Well, I don't think that that's the case. It might come into the area. I've heard that supposedly there's something come off the Southern California area, you know, underground. But what's interesting, we got a lot of caverns that we're unaware of. If you take up near Reno, that Lake Tahoe in Reno, Nevada,
yeah.
You know, somebody died, you know, out there skiing on the lake, kind of cold in the middle of the summer, and they drowned, and they found their body out in the Pacific Ocean, washing up on the beach.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. Tahoe is one spooky lake. I grew up going there. Okay, Stew Webb, thank you very much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone listening appreciates it. Let's do this again when there's a reason to do it and a topic that we can focus on. You've been great, and I really appreciate it.
Kerry, I thank you, and it's my honor in doing this with you. Keep up your good work, and we'll be in touch, and I'll hook you up with a couple of the people we talked about, Barbara and Andy, okay?
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, good night. Bye-bye.
Be published in Dave Hinson's book, where they had set him up, wateroz.com. If you go to davehinson.com, it ties into more stuff. But the deal is, Gunderson was filthy. He would always go around and he would pick guys like me to do a video with. as an example. Oh, I want to hear your story. I'm Ted Gunderson. He started floating into what they called the patriot community in the 1994, 1995 time frame, infiltrating people. Gene Chip Tatum, who was CIA, had come public with me in 1995, 1996 time frame. Of course, Ted Gunderson shows up at a couple of global science meetings, videotaping Gunderson. They're floating around on the internet now. He did it with Kathy O'Brien. He did it with many people. She was one of the ones being raped by pedophile George Herbert Walker Bush, etc. Transformationofamerica.com is her website.
Right.
So Gunderson has been all over the board with a lot of people. He's there to infiltrate. He infiltrated me in 1997, 1998 time frame. I actually lived at his place for 9 months. I was in Vegas. He wanted to have a meeting. He says, Stu, I hear you're hanging out with someone. He says, I've got an empty condo up here on a 5th-story floor, and he says, I need somebody to keep an eye on it. He says, I'm without a car. I blew this engine in my Cadillac. I'm without a car. You got a vehicle. And he says, we could help each other. Well, at that time, I did not know that he was an infiltrator and that he was trying to infiltrate me to find out what I knew. And he turned around, and I booked him on many radio shows. I was probably doing one a day of an average 5 days a week during that period of time, nationally broadcast stations when you could get on him. So I put him on a few. Well, while I was there in that period of time, I started seeing some really shaky stuff. And during the beginning, he was hanging out at Clint Murchison's house. Clint Murchison was the Dallas Cowboys. He also was the CIA broker between the CIA and the FBI. His father's house, Clint Murchison Sr., is where they had all the killers before the murder of Kennedy, and right after Kennedy got murdered, all of them show up at Clint Murchison Sr.'s house, toasting and bragging and carrying on about how the murder went down.
Okay, now hold on one second, because you know this how?
I know it because Ted Gunderson, when Clint Jr. died, Clint Murchison had a maid named Anna Mae Newman. Anna Mae Newman is now dead. But Anna Mae Newman sat up at Ted Gunderson's condo there in Las Vegas, Nevada with me, and I showed her pictures of different people and some files I had and so forth. And she says, oh, yeah, he was one of the ones at the party. He was one of the ones at the party, etc. She was there the night before they killed him and the night or later on in the afternoon after they killed Kennedy. So they were all there. What was interesting is when Murchison died, he left in his will for Ted Gunderson to be the one to guard his house and to help settle the estate of the house. In exchange, he would pay him money. He also left Anna Mae Newman, who was an illegal immigrant from Ireland, who's never had a visa or passport, was in the United States. She was nearly 70-some-odd years of age. This was back in the late 1990s. She inherited from Clint Murchison nearly $80,000. Gunderson conned her out of her money, $70,000 of it. Oh, May, I can help you, or I can pay you back. I've got a case that's going to pay me $200,000 was always his famous words. And that I need the money because I can really help these children that are being kidnapped and raped and all this tied to the Franklin cover-up in Nebraska and all this. He lied to her. He took the money, he spent the money, he paid off a house he had in California that his daughter was living in, and the whole bit. I checked about Ted Gunderson. I called his ex-wife, Jocelyn, talked to her. She had 4 children by him. Gunderson was diagnosed in 1972 or 71 before she divorced him as a paranoid schizophrenia. His daughter has the same problem. His son, Ted Sr., has the same problem.
Okay, well, before we, because I appreciate that, but at this moment, when you're saying that, did this Anna Mae, is that what you call her?
Anna Mae Newman.
Yeah, is she the one who told you that he took her money?
Yes, she did.
I see.
And he took her money. And he framed me later, or tried to frame me with the police department in Las Vegas and a SWAT team and nearly kill me. And he got this killer, he got off of charges in Las Vegas named Tom Gall that had murdered 2 people. He got him off because Gunderson was promised $200,000 by him out of his mother's estate, that Gunderson would be the trustee of the estate, etc. She was in a nursing home. If he could wrestle these documents or get these documents through someone who Gunderson had asked me to check on a Jared Schaefer who was dirty. public administrator in charge of old people and their money. And it turns out to be he had been stealing for years. There was a PI, former CI that became PI, had a bunch of documents. He wanted $4,000 for the documents. I kept telling Gunderson it costs you $4,000 if you want these documents. He says, oh no, and he tried to blackmail me, actually blackmail me and extort me to get the documents by bringing these false assault charges against Tom Gall. It's a long story. In the bottom of the link that's in this link that I've asked people to go to, that's breaking news today, Project Camelot, you interviewing me, it says Ted Gunderson. Click on that link, go all the way to the bottom. I actually had to put restraining orders on Ted Gunderson, Anna Mae Newman, because she was lying, trying to get her money back, in behalf of Ted and in behalf of this character, Tom Gall, who's walking free as a result of Ted Gunderson. That guy sat there and admitted to me he blew these two people away, but yet, and it wasn't self-defense. It was the fact that he owed $150 to two guys that came to his door to collect their money for moving some stuff for him. And he shot him at the front door, at his front door. And Gunderson went in there and testified. I'm a former FBI, I'm a licensed PI out of California, and he made up all this crap. And there was a girl with Westward newspaper in Las Vegas who had interviewed and saw all this, and she witnessed things because, you know, I was kind of like over at Ted's after I moved out of there. I was over there on occasion. He would ask me to watch Anna Mae Newman and so forth, keep an eye on her when he was out of town, so I was just doing it, but I knew there was some things wrong. And I've learned that he had been a Iran-Contra player. Al Martin found out about it. He said that Al Martin, Raw.com, the Iran-Contra whistleblower, and Stephen Dennerstein, the famous Iran-Contra investigator, Al's mentioned several times in his book and other things, had found out that attorney generals all around the United States had found Ted Gunderson was ripping off money from little old ladies consistently. He was going in and supposedly helping them. There was one gal during
okay. But look, I appreciate this, but we need to come back to the subject at hand. You've given enough background, I think, on why you think Gunderson was not, I guess, on the up and up, so to speak. So at this moment, can we get back to PROMIS software and basically follow that line out, because it really has to do with Michael Riconosciuto and what went on with the PROMIS software, how it was basically sold to the Mossad and became a profiling software for use really worldwide by the governments.
It's not only used by the governments; it's also used privately, and I'll explain it. There is a document in that document I've referred to, the Project Camelot. Right below Ted Gunderson, you'll see a document that said Ted Gunderson selling Stinger missiles to Osama bin Laden, which he did. This was when he was kicked out of the FBI in 1979 for holding satanic ceremonies in the FBI office. They diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia for a second time. They put him in early retirement. He was the crossover between CIA and FBI. When Gunderson left, he had sold those Stinger missiles during that period of time while he was ahead of the FBI office out there in L.A. That document proves it. That's an internal memorandum. I can't say where I got it. It's an internal memorandum of the United States government given to me by a spook. If you notice in that document, I'm not looking at it right now. I'm looking at a still picture of you, Kerry, because of the camera. But if you look at that document, it talks about Stinger missiles. And it mentions Michael Riconosciuto in there. It mentions the word Inslaw in there, and it also refers to a neutron bomb in the bottom of the document. These were items that they were peddling in behalf of the George Bush crime syndicate, part of Black Ops, illegal Black Ops, using the FBI, Division Number 5, which he was and was after retirement, interconnected in with dirty CIA. Now, here's where Inslaw went down. Michael Riconosciuto was a brilliant guy. I mean, I met him when I was in prison through a transfer station in El Reno, Oklahoma, and when they were shuffling me around. We saw each other for nearly 4 hours, 2 to 4 hour time frame. I had an opportunity to get my ear filled real quick, and I asked him what it was all about. He told me. And he had done a lot. Then later I came across the gal who, Jackie McGauley, The McMartin preschool case, if you remember the name, Ted Gunderson says, oh, you know, when I left the FBI, I tried to help kids. The McMartin preschool case, he was there to cover up. The day they were digging in to prove there was a tunnel running from the McMartin over to a Catholic church set across the street or next door. Kids were being taken out, they're drugged and used by pedophiles. They were selling them. Well, Gunderson's there to cover it up. He tried to kill Jackie. Jackie she actually met Michael Reconasciuto's father, etc. You can bring her on one of these days in an interview, but to give it to you in a nutshell, I've come across not only her and a lot of evidence she accumulated during that period of time that was Gunderson stuff. That Gunderson rips her off, the whole 9 yards. There's in these documents I just put into this link. You'll see the stuff where he ran up her phone bill. He stole credit cards from her, tried to kill her, murder her. There's even a statement from her a few years back about all this. Gunderson was operating out of Cabazon Indian Reservation, where Danny Castle back in 1990 and 91 was doing investigations of what he called the Octopus. He was working with my good friend Bill McCoy, which I mentioned earlier, the private investigator. Bill had worked with Terry Reid also in his book and gave him a lot of this stuff for his book, Clinton Bush and the CIA. In it has that information. So.
Okay. Are you familiar with anything to do with the global, what are called the global settlements or the Iraqi dinar?
No, I am not.
Okay.
I am.
All right. So as far as this mortgage scandal goes, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we move on to this subject, the PROMIS software and so on?
No, except for the fact that they need to really look at it. I'm asking everybody that views this video, they go out there and start, clicking on those links versus assets, this, assets, that, and look at it. And, for those fans that are covering up, they've always got Denver, Colorado covering up. They've got the FBI, the DEA, CIA. They got, U.S. attorneys, judges all in their pockets. I have, you could see bribes and payoffs in a link that says Obama, Bush narcotics money laundering funds Obama and McCain. It's on both the front page underneath Larry Mizell and also in that link about the mortgage bankers. And look at those bribes of the U.S. attorney and so forth. They've got them in their pocket. It's going to take somebody that's got some guts and somebody that will, should we say, other than an override Eric Holder, who's a cover-up meister for him. Maybe somebody in this new strike force. They got 53 attorneys and 200 agents. Maybe somebody will really do something. I don't know. But I'm seeing cover-up going on all over the place, as usual, to take care of the insiders and take care of this Bush crime syndicate. Of course.
Okay. All right. And just for the listeners, we are going to be covering the PROMIS software situation and going through Stew Webb's evidence in this regard. I had also talked to Anthony Sanchez about some of this information, and so on a previous video you would have gotten some of that information, also my radio show and my other interviews with Anthony, who has also been investigating this line of research. However, Stu has different information. He was involved in investigating the whole PROMIS software from the early days, from what I understand. Isn't that right? Along with Ted Gunderson, who was involved in, well, my understanding is he was involved in helping the investigation into this. You seem to have some different information in that regard. But let's start at the before we go in that direction. Can we start with describing the PROMIS software as you understand it, what went on, and how that leads to the whole rollout of using drug money for black projects, etc.
Well, I've come across way back in 1991 a gentleman by the name of Bill McCoy. It was one of the Iran-Contra famous investigators. He was also the private investigator for Private Tyree for Terry Reid. He testified in the Reid trial, that wrote the book Clinton Bush and the CIA, a good friend of mine. He also worked for Ed Wilson, who was charged in the Libyan sales of weapons under EATSCO. So Bill knew what was going on. He was familiar with a lot of stuff. I had been in Bill's house a couple of times, and I saw and know of and have a lot of the documentation, or some of the documentation Bill had shared with me. I worked with him over the years until 1997 when he was killed over the exposure of Strassmeyer, the German connection, on the Oklahoma City bombing case. So Bill had also been the investigator, private investigator, after he left the IG's office at the Heneghan in the 70s and retired. He had been the private investigator for the Hamilton family, who was the Inslaw engineer. They had created the Inslaw software, and it was a special software and you had to have a disk, a hard disk, in order to use it. It was called PROMIS, and it was for the purpose of tracking white-collar crime within the Justice Department. The Justice Department agreed at the time to buy it for $200 million from the Hamilton family, including, the disk that they need, the hard disk to operate it. And they actually stole it, never paid him. And it was bizarre because they had a congressional investigation on it, and they said it was the most bizarre thing that they had ever seen, that the Justice Department itself was stealing the software, et cetera. It's all been in the press in the past. Now, what had happened with Inslaw over the years, I had found out, is that they took the Inslaw software, and here's where it ties to Ted Gunderson. Gunderson's name had been floating around among different people saying, oh, he's a good guy, he helps guys like you, Stu. I'd heard about it clear back in 91 when I was hiding from the FBI before they made me a political prisoner in 92 to 93, and then dismissed the charges to shut me up. Well, I came across the guy in 94, and I thought, it's kind of flaky and all this other stuff. And then in 95, 96 time frame, came across him a few more times, and, he seemed legit. His so-called concern. He was a good fake. He's dead now, and thank God, and I wish him the best of luck in hell, because that's where the bastard is, and that's where he belonged on what he did. He was a pedophile. I talked to his ex-wife. He was actually nearly charged for raping some 14-year-old kid.
Okay, I'm sorry, Stu, who are we talking about here?
Ted Gunderson. He ties to Inslaw. Now,
okay, so you're accusing him of being a pedophile?
There's a girl that was raped by him that was in a satanic family when she was about 14 years of age. It will Richmond, Ponderosa, Red Hawk Homes, and others. And those entities are no longer in existence, a couple of them. But those were sold to the CalPA. That's the California Pension Fund. And that's what bellied up. And a lot of the municipalities bought those mortgages. And if you remember, Elizabeth Warren was one of the first to scream, and then the attorney generals of many states, including Massachusetts, she was screaming about it here 4, 5, 6 months ago, about the fact they were going to prosecute the ones that were doing the scams. And this is where banks came back in. They came back in with their banks that they owned and controlled, major banks. And they came back in and they had mortgages, and they were trying to foreclose on people that were legitimately paying their mortgage and had been to, say, ABC Mortgage Company over here. And they would come in and say, no, we're Citibank, and we own your mortgage, and we're foreclosing on your house. Well, they did this to 3.5 million people have been affected by this, and their equity is just totally gone. They were raped, robbed, and looted by these same people. Now,
okay.
These people, economic plunder under U.S. laws, I'm not an attorney, but underneath U.S. laws, economic plunder is the death penalty. These people should be brought to trial. This is like killing somebody causing economic plunder.
Sure, I hear you. Okay, when you say you're talking about the derivatives, can you talk a little bit more about the derivative situation? Because I know that actually that is the next, more or less, the next card that's supposed to fall in this list of dominoes that's going on. So
in the bottom of that link on the same posting about the mortgage bailout, you'll see Norman Brownstein. He's a director of Deutsche Bank. He's also my ex-in-laws and Larry Meisel's attorney. Norman Brownstein was one of the 6 CIA counsel to George Herbert Walker Bush when he was CIA director. He's the one that's been setting up all these trusts to hide their identity and hide their assets. He always turns up at the directorship. Citicorp, AIG, Silverado, et cetera, every place you go, here's the Global Crossings, everything that's ever gone bankrupt or had a problem, here's Norman Brownstein. But Norman Brownstein is on the board of directors of Deutsche Bank in charge of selling and pushing mortgage-backed derivatives. Now, when they do that, they're raising money for their own bank. They're selling garbage. They're selling. It's like the junk on daisy chain. They're selling paper that's worthless. It's like the Federal Reserve. They loan to a Federal Reserve Bank. That Federal Reserve Bank could turn around. It used to be they could loan out 22 times for every dollar that the Fed actually loaned them.
Right.
Now, underneath Bush, it went to 100, and under Obama, it's gone to 400%, which is just bizarre. Paper money out of nowhere.
Okay, but can I stop you right there and ask you?
Please.
Okay, the mortgage derivatives, though, is this going on right now? It's continuing?
It's continuing. It's not. They're not passing the mortgages so much, but the derivatives are still going around. It's like if you take the country of Greece, they figured that 40% of the debt to their banks in Greece are nothing but Goldman Sachs derivatives that were peddled to them. And if they were to bankrupt on them, it would solve the problem in Greece and their debt. They just take care of the problem. And if all the banks worldwide and all the countries would say, screw the Federal Reserve and screw Europe Central Bank, ECB, these are the same 100 Templar bankers, and go back to gold or silver standards in each country like Kennedy wanted to do before they assassinated him when he started printing $2 silver certificates and $5 silver certificates.
Okay. Let me ask you this, just to bring this even more up to date. Are you aware that there, in theory, that Geithner has been arrested? Have you heard this?
Well, I heard that he had been detained at one time here several months back, and he was.
No, actually, I heard that last week he was arrested, and I also heard that Bill Gates was arrested. I did call Microsoft to get a statement. I put this on my blog, and basically they will not confirm or deny that information. However, I have back channel information that tells me this indeed is happening, and that indeed Bill Gates is as we speak, allegedly being detained and is under arrest. The reason was he gave a backdoor through software to Bush to get access to getting a cut off the top of these trading programs that go on.
Well, the trading programs, there's a story. I haven't heard say this. I have.
Okay.
There was something about the arrest of Geithner the other day. Someone mentioned it, and I remembered that, it was in the past, but that was the extent of it. But no, I really don't know about either one of them at the current time. But I am aware of the backdoor deals. If you were to go to my table of contents off the front page or off the news page towards the top and click there, go to the third column over from the left, and go down where there's several stories. There must be 24 of them written by Tom Flacco. It's talking about the insider trading and 15-second delay and spying on the American people and so forth in the trading. Actually, there's a window of almost 3 minutes now that I understand that they can do in trading before anybody else.
This is Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and we are live with Stew Webb. Tonight is going to be an absolutely fascinating discussion, assuming we can get this going. What I'd like to do is, this is our second interview, and we're going to be talking about some really amazing stuff. Do you want to start off with just give yourself a background, as a short background for those who haven't heard the previous interview? And then I do encourage everyone to go and listen to the previous interview. It will be well worth your while. And meanwhile, let's see what we can do as far as the rest of this goes. So, Stu, if you can basically, when you called me, you talked about sorry, I'm trying to get this screen organized, but it's absolutely not going to do it. When you called me, you talked about having some documents that you just were able to release, and what I'd like to do is direct people to your website to begin with, so that they can go and click on some of those links as you speak. We are going to get into the whole PROMIS software situation, but before we do that, I wanted you had some documents about the, I believe it was the mortgage scandal going on.
Yes, if someone goes to everyone goes to my website at www.stewwebb.com, stewwbb.com, and scroll down about an inch, you'll see breaking news. Click on there, and then go down about a foot until you come to today's date to see a second set of flags there. And look at today's date. You'll see Project Camelot. We're going to be discussing some of the documents in it. And also right below that is about the mortgage scandal. And as I promised you before, Kerry, that I would give you the information. And what I released is because the SEC is covering this up, and I believe the U.S. Attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney out of New York that's on the Special Crimes Task Force that supposedly just did the settlement with the banks of the $25 billion. They announced it within 5 days, within, I think, 10 days after I gave them the information. And it pertains to Asset Investors, a publicly traded corporation, a subsidiary of MDC Holdings of Denver, Colorado, which was the parent company of Silverado Savings, the CIA dirty bank, money laundering, narcotics, etc., that my ex-in-laws owned with Larry Mizell, who's the current bank bailout scamster. And those documents represent the bundlers. These are the people that were buying up mortgages all across the United States from mortgage brokers. They would take then and duplicate the mortgages after they sold the original mortgage to Wall Street pension funds, bonds, to other banks and institutions, financial institutions. Then they turn around and they duplicated those same mortgages, same paperwork, and they peddled them a second time, a third time, a fourth, clip to 9 times. And they were actually paying the payments on them so that they would not trigger anything until they got it flooded into the market. Then they could trigger it, and they were back their mortgage-backed securities that they then began peddling with what is known as the derivative market, where they could profiteer, should we say, they could times it 400%, up to 400 underneath Obama, 100 underneath George Bush. Now, those are the entities that were buying up and bundling the mortgage. And if anybody clicks on those links inside where it says Asset Investors this, Asset Investors that, they are no longer in existence. As soon as I and others helped put them in the bank bailout situations, people inside U.S. intelligence helped me in Interpol. In 2008, we thought we had them go into bankruptcy court and the whole 9 yards. Bush bails them out, of course, at taxpayers' expense. Now, all of a sudden, Asset Investors is no longer traded on the New York Stock Exchange. It was Colorado's largest financial institution, by the way, I might add. And there is a link in there, in the very bottom of it, about Norman Brownstein. Norman is Larry Mizell, my former father-in-law. It's now dead. That Mizell, the Illuminati bankers pass the money on to the next one, usually their sons, but in this case, his son wasn't part of the game. So he passed it on to Mizell, who became the new Illuminati banker. But when they pass it, everything goes to them. But Mizell and Millman had come up with the idea of duplicating all these mortgages in the whole 9 yards, and actually paying payments for a while before they triggered a financial collapse. They figured they could get control of 90 to 95% of the economy before that happened, of which they have now, and they've done that in the past 30 years. So they are the ones that are responsible for the financial collapse in bundling up mortgages worldwide. And it goes right back to that company. They dropped off the New York Stock Exchange immediately before the bank bailout was announced. They were also, through Richmond American Homes, one of the largest home building corporations in the United States, one of the top 10. I believe it's actually now in the top 5. They were actually making it look like they were building houses in Southern California. Tens of thousands of houses, of which were never built.